Story 1.
I got uninvited from my brother's wedding for being bisexual, and somehow I'm the one who ruined it from my couch in my pajamas cuddling my boyfriend. Here's what happened. My brother Marcus asked me not to come to his own wedding because his fiancée Diane's ultra-religious family might cause a scene if I brought my boyfriend. I accepted it. Didn't fight, didn't cry, just stayed home. Then my parents texted asking where I was. I told them the truth, and that single honest reply detonated a family war that ended in harassment legal charges and a brother I no longer recognize. So let me set the stage. I'm a guy in my mid-20s, bisexual, and honestly way too used to being treated like a problem. My boyfriend is Ethan. My brother is Marcus, married to Diane, whose father Gerald is the kind of man who thinks God handed him a personal vendetta. My mom is Linda. My dad is Robert. And then there's Natalie, Diane's closeted half-sister who nobody saw coming. Marcus and I used to share a bed when thunderstorms knocked the power out. He'd throw his arm over me and say, "Nothing gets past me, little man." He was 4 years older and built like he believed it. I grew up thinking my brother was a wall between me and anything that could hurt me. That wall came down on a Tuesday in March, 8 weeks before the wedding. We were at a diner, his idea neutral ground, which should have been my first clue. He ordered coffee and didn't touch it. Kept turning the mug in circles on the table handle at 12 o'clock, then 3, then 6. So here's the thing, he said. Diane's parents are. You know how they are. Conservative. Yeah. He cleared his throat. And Diane and I talked about it, and we think it might just be easier if you came solo. Without Ethan. I remember the specific feeling, not a stab, not a punch, but a slow leak. Like someone had opened a valve somewhere in my chest and something warm was draining out. Or, Marcus continued, and the mug handle hit 9 o'clock. If that's uncomfortable for you, maybe you could just sit this one out. Sit this one out. Like it was a pickup basketball game. I said, okay. That's the part people can't understand. They read this and think I should have flipped the table, made a speech, drawn a line. But here's the thing about being bisexual for 25 years. In a world that keeps handing you little cuts, you develop this numbness. A callous over the place where outrage should live. Ethan and I had been together 3 years by then, and the things that had happened in those 3 years, the comments from coworkers, the jokes from extended family, the way certain friends just evaporated it all, built this reflex. Someone pushes you out, you step back. You make it easy for them. You tell yourself it's not worth the fight because the fight never changes anything. So I told Marcus it was fine. I told him I understood. His shoulders dropped about 3 inches with relief, and that small physical collapse told me everything about how much he'd been dreading this conversation. Not because he was ashamed of asking, but because he was afraid I'd make it difficult. He hugged me in the parking lot, held on a beat too long. I think some part of him knew he was doing something that couldn't be undone. The wedding was June 14th. Ethan and I spent that Saturday on the couch watching a terrible horror movie, the kind where you can see the boom mic in every other shot. He had his head on my chest. I was running my fingers through his hair. It was genuinely one of the most peaceful afternoons I'd had in months. Then, my phone buzzed. Asterisk, asterisk, Linda, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Honey, where are you? We're at the church, and I don't see you anywhere. Asterisk. My stomach dropped. Not because of the question, but because of what the question meant. Marcus hadn't told them. He'd cut me from the guest list and never bothered to explain my absence to our own parents. I stared at the screen for maybe 30 seconds. Ethan paused the movie. You okay? I typed back the truth. Not out of spite, not to cause damage. Just because I was tired, bone tired of carrying other people's secrets for them. Asterisk, asterisk, me, asterisk, 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 Marcus asked me not to come. Diane's family has a problem with me bringing Ethan. It's fine, Mom. Enjoy the wedding. Asterisk. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing for 45 minutes. I found out later what happened in those 45 minutes. My mother Linda stood up from her pew during the cocktail hour, walked directly to Marcus, and said in full earshot of the head table, "You told your brother he wasn't welcome at your wedding because of who he loves." Marcus tried to pull her aside. She wouldn't move. Robert stood up next. My quiet newspaper reading, never raises his voice father stood up and said, "Answer, your mother's son." 2 factions formed in under a minute. Linda and Robert on one side, Gerald, Diane's father, on the other, already red-faced, already loud, already saying something about lifestyle choices and the sanctity of this ceremony. Diane was crying. Marcus was trying to hold the middle arms out like a traffic cop, and the whole thing nearly went physical when Gerald shoved Robert's shoulder. My parents left. Half of Marcus's groomsmen followed. I know all this because Marcus showed up at my apartment at 11 p.m. that night, still in his tuxedo, tie yanked, loose veins visible in his neck. You times told times them, he didn't knock, he pounded. They asked where I was. I answered, "You could have said you were sick. You could have said times anything, asterisk. You could have told them the truth yourself, Marcus." He stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. Then he left for his honeymoon. That's when things escalated so much it's unbelievable. Within 48 hours, my Instagram was flooded. Ethan's too. Gerald's side of the family found every account we had. The messages were scripture wrapped around slurs, the kind of hate that dresses itself in holiness, asterisk, abomination. Repent. You destroyed a family, asterisk, dozens of them. Some from accounts with profile pictures of smiling grandmothers. I screenshotted everything and sent them to Marcus. His reply times, "Stop disturbing my honeymoon with this drama. You started it." Asterisk. I sent more screenshots. He left me on read. Then Diane's father Gerald texted Marcus asking for my home address. And Marcus, my brother, the wall between me and anything that could hurt me, gave it to him. I found out about the address from Ethan. He was standing at the living room window with his phone in one hand, the other hand pressed flat against the glass like he was bracing for impact. "Someone just posted our street name in the comments of your brother's wedding photo," he said. His voice was steady, but his hand on the glass was white at the knuckles. I called Marcus. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Third time he picked up. "Did you give Gerald our address?" A pause. The sound of waves. He was on a beach somewhere. He said he wanted to send you a letter. To apologize. Marcus. Look at what his family's been sending us. Look at the screenshots I sent you. Does that sound like a man who wants to apologize? I think you're being paranoid. He posted our street name online. Another pause. Longer. Then I can't deal with this right now. I'm on my honeymoon. He hung up. I stood there holding a dead phone and felt something shift, not break, not crack, but shift times the way tectonic plates move. Quiet. Irreversible. The brother who used to throw his arm over me during thunderstorms had just handed my location to a man who called me an abomination. And his defense was that he was on vacation. Ethan and I packed bags that night and stayed with my parents. Linda was already in motion. She'd been in motion since the reception, apparently calling attorneys, documenting everything, building a file with the precision of someone who'd found a purpose that burned. I walked into my parents' kitchen at 7 a.m. and she had printouts spread across the table. Every message, every comment, every threat. Organized by date sender and severity. "Mom, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." She didn't look up. "I should have done this years ago. I should have seen what was happening to you and I didn't, and that stops now." Robert was quieter about it. He always was. But that weekend I went into my old bedroom and found a bisexual pride flag, pink, purple, blue thumbtacked above the headboard. No note, no announcement. Just the flag hung, slightly crooked, because Robert has never been able to hang anything straight in his life. I stood in the doorway, staring at it, and something behind my sternum cracked open in a way that had nothing to do with pain. The legal process took 3 months. Linda filed harassment charges against Gerald and 4 members of Diane's extended family. The evidence was overwhelming, hundreds of messages, the doxing, a voicemail Gerald left on Ethan's phone at 2 a.m. calling us things I won't repeat here. But the moment that broke the case open was Natalie. Natalie was Diane's half-sister. 23. Quiet at family gatherings. The kind of person who always seemed to be standing slightly behind someone else. She reached out to me through a burner Instagram account, no profile picture, no followers created that same day. Asterisk, I have screenshots of my father coordinating the messages. Group chat, I can testify. Asterisk, I told her she didn't have to. I told her the risk. Asterisk, I know the risk. I'm like you. I've been hiding for 6 years. I'm tired of hiding. Asterisk, she testified. In doing so, she outed herself to every member of her family simultaneously. I watched her sit in that room with her hands folded on the table, voice clear, reading messages. Her own father had written messages about people like her, about people like us times, and her hands never shook. Not once. The case was won. Financial penalties against Gerald and 3 others. Restraining orders. The kind of legal consequences that don't undo damage but draw a line around it. Then came the sit-down. Linda arranged it, insisted on it. Marcus came to my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon in October. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where Linda had built her case file, and he looked smaller. Not physically, just reduced. Like someone had turned down his contrast. "I'm sorry," he said, "for the address, for not listening, for the wedding." The words were correct. Every single one. And every single one landed like a coin dropped on carpet, technically. They're technically making contact, producing no sound at all. I looked at him, at this stranger wearing my brother's face. "I miss who you used to be," I said. His jaw tightened. He stared at the table. Then he stood up, put his hands in his pockets, and walked out the front door. No goodbye, no rebuttal. Just the click of the latch. Linda disinherited him the following week. That was 7 months ago. Marcus and I haven't spoken since. Ethan and I moved to a new apartment address, unknown to Marcus, unknown to Diane, unknown to Gerald. We adopted a cat named Thunderstorm, which Ethan thinks is funny, and I think is exactly right. My parents are different people now. Linda volunteers with a local LGBTQ organization. Robert still can't hang a flag straight, but he tries. They see me now, not the version of me that made things easy for everyone, but the actual me, the one who exists fully and loves who he loves. Natalie disappeared from contact after the case. Her burner account went dark. I don't know where she is. I think about her constantly, this woman who burned down her own shelter to light my way. I hope she's somewhere safe. I hope she's somewhere time seen, asterisk. The cruel math of all this settles on me sometimes, usually late at night, a wedding meant to join two families, permanently severed one. And the person blamed for it all was on a couch fingers in his boyfriend's hair watching a movie so bad you could see the boom mic. I never even made it to the church.
Story 2.
My husband let his sister turn my dead baby's nursery into her baby shower venue. And when I broke down crying in front of a room full of strangers, she looked me in the eye and said, "It's not her fault I couldn't produce a child." So let me walk you through how I went from opening my home to a pregnant, abandoned girl out of the goodness of my grieving heart, to being treated like a maid in the house I paid for, to watching my marriage of 8 years disintegrate in a single weekend. I'm 29 female. My husband is Marcus. We lost 2 pregnancies, the last one at 31 weeks. His younger sister is Leah. She's 20, and she showed up at our door sobbing, pregnant, and completely alone. And my mother is Diane, who I hadn't spoken to in a long time, but ended up being the only person who showed up for me when everything fell apart. The first thing you need to understand is the nursery. I built it during my second pregnancy, the one that made it to 31 weeks. The one where we had a name picked out, a coming home outfit washed in fragrance-free detergent, a car seat installed by a fire station technician who shook Marcus's hand and said, "Congratulations." I painted the walls myself, a sage green that took me 4 trips to the hardware store to get right. I assembled the crib at 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, because my belly was so big and my heart was so full, and I thought foolishly that preparing hard enough could protect us. After we lost her, I closed the door. Marcus never opened it. I never opened it. It just existed at the end of the hallway like a sealed wound, and we walked past it every day and said nothing, and somehow that was how we grieved. Separately, silently. In a house I bought with my inheritance before we even got married, that context matters for what comes next. Leah showed up on a Thursday night in March. Mascara streaked down to her jaw. 1 duffel bag. 5 months pregnant. Her boyfriend had kicked her out, changed the locks, and blocked her number while she was at a doctor's appointment. Their parents, Marcus's and Leah's, had been out of the picture for years, which is a longer story I won't get into, but the short version is that Leah had no one. Literally no one. And I looked at this girl standing on my porch, 20 years old pregnant, shaking, and I saw every nightmare I'd ever had about being alone during the worst moment of your life. So I pulled her inside. I made her chamomile tea. I sat with her on the couch while she sobbed into a throw pillow, and when she finally fell asleep, I covered her with a blanket and whispered to Marcus in the kitchen times, "She stays as long as she needs." Asterisk. He cried, hugged me so hard my ribs ached, told me I was the most generous person he'd ever known. I want you to remember he said that. The first 2 weeks were genuinely beautiful. Leah and I bonded in a way I didn't expect. We'd stay up late eating mint chocolate chip ice cream straight from the carton, talking about everything. Her fears about being a single mom, my grief, the weird and terrible and sacred thing that pregnancy is. She'd rest her head on my shoulder and say, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I believed her. I think she even meant it then. The shift was so gradual, I almost can't pinpoint when it started. Week 3, Leah stopped doing her dishes. Not a big deal. She was tired, she was pregnant, I got it, I washed them. Week 4, her clothes migrated from the guest room to every surface in the living room, bras on the couch, socks on the kitchen counter, wet towels on the hardwood. I mentioned it gently. She said her back hurt and she'd get to it. She didn't get to it. Week 5, she asked me to do her laundry. Not asked, told. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling her phone and said without looking up, "Can you throw my stuff in? I'm the pregnant one, so..." That so did a lot of heavy lifting. I did the laundry, I started labeling my food in the fridge because entire meals I'd prepped for the week would vanish overnight. I'd open the fridge Monday morning and find my containers empty, not even rinsed, stacked back on the shelf like a taunt. When I brought it up, Leah said she had cravings and couldn't control them. Marcus said, "She's pregnant, babe. Just buy more." Asterisk. She's pregnant. Asterisk. Those two words became the lock on every conversation. Leah left hair in the shower drain. She's pregnant. Leah took over the living room TV for 12 hours a day. She's pregnant. Leah snapped at me for vacuuming too loudly at noon. On a Saturday, she's times pregnant. Asterisk. And I kept swallowing it. Because I knew what it felt like to be pregnant and terrified. Because I knew what it felt like to lose that. Because some broken part of me believed that if I could just take care of this girl and this baby, maybe the universe would notice. Maybe it would count for something. Marcus, meanwhile, was becoming someone I didn't recognize. He hovered over Leah, constantly drove her to every appointment, assembled a registry with her, talked about the baby with an excitement I hadn't seen since we'd lost ours. It hit me one night watching them huddle over her phone, picking out stroller colors that he wasn't helping his sister. He was reliving something, replacing something, and he couldn't see it because he'd never once sat with his grief long enough to look it in the face. By week 7, I was cleaning the house I owned like it was someone else's, cooking meals that got eaten without thanks, doing laundry that wasn't mine, sleeping next to a man who hadn't asked me how I was in over a month. Then one morning, Leah knocked on our bedroom door and said she wanted to talk about the baby shower. She said she wanted to have it here at the house. She said she'd already picked a date. And she said she had the perfect room in mind for the gifts and the main setup. My stomach dropped before she even finished the sentence. She was looking right at me when she said it. Right at me when she pointed down the hallway toward the closed door at the end. I said no. I said it clearly standing in the hallway with my coffee going cold in my hands, and I watched Leah's face cycle through surprise, confusion, and something harder underneath something that looked like calculation. "It's just sitting there," she said. "It's not being used." I said, "No, Leah." Marcus appeared behind me. I felt him before I saw him, his hand on my shoulder, his voice already tuned to that frequency. I'd come to dread gentle, reasonable, designed to make me feel like the problem. "Babe, maybe we could just..." And that was supposed to be the end of it. The baby shower was scheduled for a Saturday. Leah told me she'd moved it to a friend's apartment. She said it casually, almost sweetly, and I felt a wash of relief so strong it made me dizzy. I offered to help set up. She said no, she had it handled. She left that morning with Marcus, who was driving her, and I stood in my quiet house and breathed for what felt like the first time in weeks. I took a bath. I made lunch. I read 40 pages of a novel I'd started before any of this. At around 3 o'clock, I heard the front door open and the unmistakable sound of a crowd. Voices, laughter. A dozen people, maybe more, streaming into my living room with gift bags and balloons. Leah, in the center of it all, radiant, one hand on her belly, the other gesturing people inside like she owned the place. I came downstairs in sweatpants and wet hair. "What is this?" "The venue fell through," Leah said brightly. "Last minute. You don't mind, right?" I minded. But there were 15 strangers in my living room already unwrapping paper plates, and Marcus was setting up a speaker on my kitchen counter, and the social pressure of it was so perfectly engineered that I just stood there. Then I heard footsteps above me. Not one set, several. Going up my stairs, down my hallway, toward the closed door. I moved so fast I knocked a gift bag off the banister. I took the stairs 2 at a time and turned the corner, and the door was open. The door was times open, asterisk. The sage green walls, the crib I'd assembled at 2 in the morning. The mobile with the little wooden stars I'd picked because they reminded me of the night sky the week we found out we were having a girl. All of it flooded with light and strangers. Someone had hung a banner across the crib. Asterisk. Welcome Baby Times in gold glitter script, taped directly to the wood I'd sanded by hand. A woman I'd never met was holding up a onesie against the crib rail cooing. Another was taking photos. There were gift bags piled on the changing table where I'd stacked diapers we never used. "Oh my God, this setup is times adorable times," someone said. "Leah, did you do all this?" And Leah, standing in the doorway behind me, smiled. The sound that came out of me wasn't a scream. It was lower than that, more animal. I grabbed the banner and ripped it down so hard the tape took paint with it, and the room went silent, and I turned to face all of them, with my dead daughter's name caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. "Get out. Everyone, get out of this room times now, asterisk." They scattered. Leah didn't move. She stood in the doorframe with her arms crossed beneath her belly, and her face had that expression I'd been too generous to name for weeks. Contempt dressed up as inconvenience. "You're embarrassing yourself," she said. This was my daughter's room. You times knew times that. "It's not my fault you couldn't produce a child." She said it flatly, like a fact, like weather. Why let all this go to waste? I looked past her for Marcus. He was at the end of the hallway. He'd heard everything. I could see it in the way he wouldn't lift his eyes. Marcus. Tell her to leave. Nothing. Marcus. Asterisk. Choose. Asterisk. His mouth opened. Closed. He looked at Leah's belly, then at the floor, and the silence lasted 3 seconds, but I felt every year of our marriage collapse inside it. Both of you get out of my house. They left that night. Leah called me a psycho from the driveway. Marcus carried her bags to his car without a word. He came back the next morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee I hadn't touched, still wearing the same sweatpants, and he walked in with his key like nothing had detonated 12 hours earlier. He started apologizing, telling me he wanted to make it right. I told him I just needed time away from him. Then he threw it in my face. Well, it's not my fault you lost our children. Maybe this would have never happened. My sister was right. You are selfish. I have never times made my husband feel like he cannot grieve with me. Never made him feel less than because of his pain. I carried that grief like a shared organ carefully, reverently, even when he refused to touch his half. I turned around and slapped him in the face. I never condone such behavior, and I'm very upset I would ever do that to another human. But I just couldn't deal with this. He took a step back and threw all of my makeup on the floor. Which I get, reaction, adrenaline, I just hit him. But then he broke all of my decor in the bathroom. I yelled at him to stop and that I was sorry, but he just kept going and punched a hole in my bathroom wall. Then he left. Peeled out of the driveway. Gone. I sat on the bathroom floor, surrounded by broken glass and shattered ceramic and the dust from drywall, and I called a number I hadn't dialed in 2 years. My mother picked up on the second ring. Mom. That was all I got out. Diane drove 45 minutes and 30. She walked through my front door, found me still on the bathroom floor, and she knelt down and held me. She didn't say it was going to be okay. She didn't ask what happened. She just held me until I stopped shaking. Then she stood up, pulled out her phone, and started photographing every inch of damage. The hole in the wall, the shattered mirror, the makeup ground into the tile. She moved through the house methodically, the nursery door still open, the tape residue on the crib, the banner crumpled on the floor. You're going to need a locksmith, she said, not looking up from her phone. And a lawyer. In that order. The locksmith came at 4. The attorney answered my email by 6. 8 years of marriage ended not because I stopped loving Marcus, but because I finally understood that I had been the only one in that marriage willing to grieve, willing to give, willing to break myself open for other people's comfort. And the moment I needed someone to stand in a hallway and say, times that room is sacred and you will not touch it, times the moment I needed to be chosen even once I was met with silence. I chose myself. It was the first time in years anyone had.
Story 3.
My brother hasn't changed a single diaper in 4 years of fatherhood, and somehow I'm the villain in this story. So here's what happened. My sister-in-law, Lydia, vanished one morning, left behind a letter and 2 little girls, and my brother Greg's first instinct wasn't to call the police or even check if she was alive. It was to call her mom and ask her to move in. When mom couldn't stay, he turned to me, demanding I either move into his house or take his kids entirely, because apparently fatherhood is just something women do for him. I'm 30 years old, I have my own life, and I am losing my mind. Greg is 34. Lydia is around my age. Our mom Donna is 60 and already stretched thin caring for our dad Roy, who's 65 and not doing well. And then there's Patrice, Lydia's mom, who knows a lot more than she's letting on. Let me give you the background because it matters. Greg and Lydia got married 6 years ago. She was 24, finishing a community college degree in dental hygiene. She was 3 semesters from done. I remember because she talked about it at their engagement dinner. Her eyes lit up, describing the program, the clinic hours, the patients she'd already worked with. Greg smiled through it the way you smile through a child's piano recital. Patient, tolerant, waiting for it to end. She never finished. After the wedding, Greg decided they didn't need 2 incomes. His words, not mine. What he meant was, he didn't need a wife with somewhere to be that wasn't home. First it was, take a semester off, settle in. Then it was, we're trying for a baby, the timing's bad. Then Maisie came and the conversation was over. Lydia stopped bringing it up. I noticed. Nobody else did, or nobody else cared. By the time Harper was born 2 years later, Lydia had become a ghost in her own house. Quiet, efficient. She cooked, cleaned, managed, 2 kids under 3, handled every appointment, every grocery run, every 2 a.m., fever. Greg worked a decent sales job and came home to a cooked meal and a cold beer like he was clocking into a second shift of being served. I am not exaggerating about the diapers. At Maisie's 3rd birthday party, I watched Greg hand Harper mid-blowout, screaming directly to Lydia, who was frosting a cake with one hand and keeping Maisie from sticking her fingers in a candle with the other. He said, "She needs you," and walked back to the living room to watch football with Roy. I looked at my mother. Donna looked at the floor. That's the house Lydia left. The letter was short. Lydia didn't explain much, just said she was sorry she loved the girls and she couldn't do this anymore. She asked Greg to be the father he'd never been. She left it on the kitchen counter next to a week's worth of pre-made meals and labeled Tupperware. Even in leaving, she took care of him. Greg called Donna at 6:47 a.m. I know the exact time because Donna called me at 6:52 already crying. Not because Lydia was missing, because Greg was asking her to come stay. He can't handle the girls alone, she said. He doesn't know their routines. They're his children, I said. I know, but his children. Silence. Then I'll just go for a few days. Until he sorts it out. She went for 11 days. During those 11 days, Greg did not call the police, did not contact Lydia's friends, did not call Patrice, did not Google how to make oatmeal. Donna cooked, cleaned, did school drop-off for Maisie, and managed Harper's nap schedule, while also calling home 3 times a day to make sure Roy had taken his blood pressure medication and eaten something. Roy, to his credit, lasted 9 days before he called Greg directly and said, "Send my wife home. I'm not dying alone, so you can have a maid." Roy is not a gentle man. But he wasn't wrong. When Donna came home, Greg called me. Not to ask how I was, not to update me on the girls. He opened with, "So Mom can't stay anymore and I need someone here." I waited. I actually waited because part of me thought the next sentence would be a question about Lydia. Where she might be. Whether she was safe. Whether someone should be looking for her. Can you come stay for a while? Or honestly, could you just take the girls? You've got that second bedroom. My second bedroom is my office. I work from home. I freelance. That room is how I pay rent. Greg. Have you called the police? She left a note. She wasn't kidnapped. Have you called Patrice? Lydia's mom. Why would I call her? Because your wife is times missing asterisk. She's not missing, she left. There's a difference. I need help with the girls, not a detective. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm so hard it left a crescent mark that lasted an hour. I'm not moving into your house. Then take the, I'm not taking your children. So what am I supposed to do? Be their father. He hung up on me. Within 48 hours, I'd gotten calls from Donna, Roy, and Greg's best friend Mike, all delivering variations of the same message times. You're being selfish. Those are your nieces. Family steps up. Asterisk, Donna cried. Roy called me cold. Mike, who I've spoken to maybe 6 times in my life, told me I'd regret this when the girls were older. Nobody, not one person said Greg should learn to parent. Not once. The entire family was engaged in a frantic search, not for Lydia, but for the next woman willing to erase herself into that house. I held the line. But the comments on my original post started worrying me. People were asking hard questions. Asterisk. Has anyone actually confirmed Lydia is alive? Have you checked with her mother? This sounds like it could be something worse than leaving. Asterisk. So on day 14, hands shaking, I called Patrice. She picked up on the first ring. And the second I said, I just want to make sure Lydia is safe. Greg hasn't filed a police report, but I'm thinking maybe someone should. Her voice went tight and fast in a way that made every hair on my arm stand up. Please, she said. Please don't file anything. The silence on Patrice's end lasted 3 seconds. It felt like 30. Patrice, I said carefully. Why not? She's safe. That's all I can tell you. She's safe, and she's working on things. Please. If someone files a report, they'll look for her, and if they find her, her voice cracked, not the way Donna's cracks, which is performative, designed to pull you into compliance. Patrice cracked like a window hit by a rock, sudden, structural, irreversible. She can't come back to that house, Patrice said. You understand, she times cannot asterisk. I understood. I'd understood since the engagement dinner. Did you help her leave? Another silence. Then very quietly, I drove her to the bus station. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Not because I was shocked, because my legs decided independently of my brain that this conversation required a lower center of gravity. I pressed my back against the cabinet and stared at the ceiling. Where is she? I can't tell you that. I'm not going to tell Greg. I know you're not. But I promised her. She's somewhere she can finish. That's all I'll say. Asterisk. Finish. Asterisk. 3 semesters. 6 years late. I closed my eyes and saw Lydia at that engagement dinner, describing the bite wing x-ray technique she'd perfected, and Greg checking his phone under the table. Patrice. The girls. I know. Her voice went thin as paper. You think I don't know. You think I sleep. Someone has to. She'll call you, Patrice said. Give her a day. She'll call you herself. Just please. No police, no reports, no Greg. She hung up before I could answer. Lydia called at 1140 p.m. The next night, from a number with an area code I didn't recognize. I was still awake. I'd been awake since Patrice's call, more or less running every scenario through my head, like cards through a shuffler. None of them came up clean. "It's me," she said. Her voice was different. Not broken, not hollow. Asterisk. Stripped. Asterisk. Like someone who'd sanded off every unnecessary layer and was speaking from raw wood. "Are you okay? I'm enrolled. Started Monday. I have a room. I have a job at a grocery store, deli counter, 22 hours a week. I'm okay." She said it like a list. Like she'd rehearsed it. Like she knew I'd need the facts before I could hear the rest. "Lydia, I know what you're going to say. You left your kids." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Then she inhaled ragged wet, the sound of someone who has cried so much their lungs have memorized the rhythm, and said, "I know leaving the kids was wrong." She cried when she said she knew and hoped they could forgive her. She really couldn't live this life anymore. Leaving them was the hardest decision she ever made, but she felt it was better than taking them and letting them starve with her. At least here, they have a home and family. I did ask why she couldn't just divorce my brother then. She said she didn't have the money for a lawyer or anything. No home to return to. She's not proud of it, but said she couldn't stay and fight. 6 years without income, without a degree, without a bank account. Greg didn't monitor. She'd done the math. She'd done it over and over, lying awake next to him while he snored, and every version ended the same way, destitute in a shelter with 2 children she couldn't feed. She didn't tell me where exactly she was. Didn't want to risk it. Asked me not to give her number to my family. I did tell her about the situation with her kids, how Greg handed them off like luggage, how he'd called Donna, then me, then tried to pawn them entirely, how he still hadn't filed a single document or made a single phone call to find her, how his first and only instinct every time was to locate the nearest woman and transfer the weight. She went quiet for a long time. Then she just said, "My brother will figure it out. She cannot help in any way right now. She will come back to her babies when she can." Good grief, I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to say times those girls wake up every morning and you're not there. Asterisk. But I thought about Greg handing a screaming Harper to Lydia while she frosted a cake, and I realized those girls have been waking up every morning with one functional parent for their entire lives. They just didn't know it was only one. So now I carry this. Lydia's number saved under a fake name. Patrice's secret sitting in my chest like a swallowed stone. The knowledge that my sister-in-law is in another state working a deli counter and studying dental anatomy, building the life my brother dismantled before it started. Greg called again yesterday. Same script. The girls are out of control. Maisie won't stop asking for mama. Harper has a diaper rash he doesn't know how to treat. He said, and I quote, "This isn't sustainable." I almost laughed. 6 years of Lydia doing everything alone that was sustainable, 2 weeks of Greg doing a fraction of it, and the whole structure collapses. Donna has started going over on weekends. She looks exhausted. Roy calls me every few days to complain that his wife is being borrowed again. The irony, Roy, who never cooked a meal in 65 years, angry that his domestic support has been redirected to another man who never cooked a meal, is so thick I could choke on it. Nobody asks about Lydia anymore. She's been replaced in the conversation by logistics. Who's covering Tuesday? Who's handling the pediatrician? Who's buying diapers? The family has moved from times where is she times to times, who's next times, without ever passing through times why did she go? Asterisk. And I sit here holding a burner phone number in a secret, and the growing unbearable understanding that nothing in this family will change. Greg will not become a father. He will find another woman, a girlfriend, a neighbor, a church volunteer, and the cycle will reset. Maisie will grow up watching it. Harper won't remember anything else. Lydia asked me not to tell. So I won't. But I needed to tell someone.
Story 4.
I funded my wife's entire acting career, gave up my own dreams so she could chase hers, and she repaid me by using that talent to perform the role of faithful wife while sleeping with 2 men in our bed. Then there's the guy I was hooking up with for months who swore he was single. Turns out his wife works directly under me at my job every single day. First story. I'm Mike, 33. I married Tracy when she was 24, became her biggest cheerleader, her agent, her ATM, whatever she needed to make it as an actress. She landed her first theater role and started weekend rehearsals. What she was actually rehearsing had nothing to do with any script. Second story. I'm a bisexual man in my 30s. I met a guy I'll call Dean on a dating app. Casual thing, no strings. Then I saw him at a mall with his wife and 2 kids, and his wife is Natalie, a woman who reports directly to me at work. Tracy and I met at a movie theater in 2018. She was working the concession stand, and I was the idiot who kept coming back for popcorn I didn't need just to talk to her. She had this laugh that made you feel like you'd accomplished something. 3 months of refills later, I asked her out. A year after that, I proposed. She said yes before I finished the sentence. What people don't understand is that Tracy wasn't always the person she became. Early on, she was warm, present. She'd fall asleep on my shoulder during bad movies and wake up pretending she'd watched the whole thing. She told me on our third date that she wanted to be an actress, and the way her eyes lit up, I believed in her dream before I even believed in us. So I invested. Not blindly, but deliberately. I had my own ambitions. I'd been saving to open a small recording studio. Music production was my thing since college. But Tracy kept getting rejected from auditions, and each rejection carved a little more light out of her. I couldn't watch that. I redirected the studio fund into acting classes, headshots, a vocal coach, a better wardrobe for callbacks. Eric, my best friend since high school, told me I was being stupid. You're building her a ladder, Mike. What happens when she climbs it and doesn't look down? I told him he was cynical. That's what I always told him. We agreed to postpone having kids. Tracy said she needed to establish herself first, and I respected that. I picked up extra freelance work to cover the gap while she went to workshops and open calls. I drove her to auditions 2 hours away. I read lines with her at midnight when she couldn't sleep. I was the audience before she ever had one. Then, 14 months ago, she got the call. A local theater company cast her in an original production, a real role, not background work. Tracy screamed so loud the neighbors knocked on our door. That night, we celebrated like we were 21 again. I remember thinking, times, this is what it was all for. Asterisk. Rehearsals started on weekends, Saturday mornings, sometimes running into Sunday. I didn't question it. Why would I? This was the thing we'd sacrificed for. The changes were gradual. So gradual that if you weren't paying attention, and I wasn't not the way I should have been, you'd miss them entirely. First, the phone became an extension of her hand. She'd tilt the screen away when I walked past. Not dramatically, just enough. Then the texting at 1 a.m. I asked once who she was talking to. Jake. He's my co-star. We're running lines. Running lines at 1 in the morning? I let it go. The wardrobe shift came next. Tracy had always dressed well, but suddenly it was different. Shorter skirts, lower necklines, perfume I'd never smelled before. She started going to rehearsal, looking like she was going to a club. Our conversation shrank to logistics. What's for dinner? Did you pay the electric bill? I'll be home late. Eric noticed before I did. When's the last time she actually talked to you? Not texted, talked. I couldn't answer. One night I tried to initiate something in bed. Tracy rolled over and said she was exhausted from rehearsal. Fair enough. But I lay there staring at the ceiling and something shifted in my chest. A hairline crack I tried to ignore. I brought it up the following weekend. Carefully. I said, I felt like we were drifting. Tracy's reaction was surgical. Her eyes softened. She took my hands. She said, baby, I'm just stressed. This role is everything I've worked for. You know that better than anyone. Then she kissed my forehead and delivered the line I'll never forget. Only a foolish woman would cheat on you, Mike. And I believed her. Because she was a good actress. The best I'd ever seen. The next week, Eric showed me a photo someone had posted on Instagram. Tracy, at a bar with a blonde guy, his arm draped over her shoulder. She told me she was at a late rehearsal. That doesn't look like blocking a scene to me, Eric said. My hands went cold. I confronted Tracy. She exploded. That's Chris from the cast. We all went out after rehearsal. You're going to police who I stand next to now. She turned it on me so fast I ended up apologizing. But the crack was widening. I couldn't sleep. I started checking the phone bill, dozens of calls to one number, some lasting over an hour. I Googled the number. No name attached. I hired a private investigator. A quiet guy in his 40s who looked like he'd heard every version of this story, and none of them surprised him anymore. He didn't judge. He just asked for dates, times, and a photo of Tracy. Within 2 weeks, he had documentation. Tracy and the blonde, Chris meeting at a coffee shop that turned into his car that turned into a makeout session in a parking garage. Photos time-stamped. Then the overnight, Tracy told me she was going to a friend's birthday party and would crash there. The PI followed her straight to Chris's apartment. She didn't leave until 11 the next morning. I sat in my car in the PI's office parking lot and read the report 3 times. Every photo felt like a knife wound I'd already been carrying without knowing where the blood was coming from. Now that I think of it, I should have started my investigation from the moment our communication dropped and she upgraded her wardrobe. But is that how marriage is meant to be? Suspect your spouse every time something shifts? I wasn't a simp who over-pampered Tracy or anything. We shared the bills, she did most of the chores, and I always controlled my emotions around her. I'm saying this because I've seen stories where most men ignore the red flags. I thought I was different. I wasn't. The PI called me on a Thursday. I was supposed to be out of town for a work trip through Friday. He said, come home early. Tonight, I'll drive. I got in his car at 9 p.m. We pulled onto my street at 10:15. There was a blue Toyota Venza parked in my driveway. I didn't knock on my own front door. I want you to understand that. A man shouldn't have to knock on his own front door. The PI stayed 2 steps behind me. I turned the key slowly, not because I was being strategic, but because my hands were shaking so badly, the lock felt like a combination safe. The house was dim. Living room empty. 2 wine glasses on the counter, one with lipstick, one without. Music playing from the bedroom, our bedroom. Something with bass I didn't recognize. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and heard laughter. Tracy's laugh. The one that used to make me feel like I'd accomplished something. The PI put his hand on my shoulder. I'm recording. Don't touch anyone. I took the stairs 3 at a time. The door wasn't even locked. She hadn't even bothered to lock the door. What I saw when I pushed it open will live behind my eyes for the rest of my life. Tracy was handcuffed to the headboard, our headboard, the one we'd picked out together from a furniture store in Raleigh, and Chris the blonde was on top of her, but there was a second man, someone I'd never seen. He was positioned behind Chris, involved in a way I don't need to describe because the image has already burned itself into a place no amount of therapy will reach. 3 people, my bed, my sheets, my wife. Tracy saw me first. Her face went through every stage of grief in about 2 seconds. Shock, terror, something that almost looked like relief, and then the actress kicked in. Even handcuffed to a bed with 2 men, she defaulted to performance. Mike, wait. We were just rehearsing. Rehearsing. Handcuffed to the bed. With 2 men. Rehearsing. I lunged. Not at her. At Chris. The PI caught me from behind, both arms wrapped around my chest, and I'm not a small guy, but he held me like he'd done this 100 times. He probably had. Not worth it, he said in my ear. I have everything. It's done. Chris scrambled off the bed, grabbing his jeans from the floor. The second man was already halfway to the window like he was considering a 2-story jump. Tracy was pulling at the handcuffs, screaming my name, mascara running. Mike, please listen to me. Who has the key? I asked. My voice sounded like someone else's. Flat. Mechanical. Chris fumbled in his pocket and tossed a small key onto the bed without looking at me. He and the other man were out of the room in under a minute. I heard the front door slam, then the Venza starting. I didn't uncuff her. I turned around and walked downstairs. The PI followed. I sat on the couch for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the microwave. Tracy eventually freed herself. She must have reached the key and came down wrapped in the sheet from our bed. Mike, I know what that looked like. Get out. Can we just get out? She stood outside for almost an hour shouting my name and pleading that I let her in. But after acting like she was remorseful, she became abusive, called me names, and left afterward. The next 3 days I didn't eat. Eric came over and sat with me without saying, I told you so, which is how you know someone is actually your friend. On the 4th day, I started thinking clearly. The PI's footage was thorough, timestamps, faces, everything. But I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted Tracy to understand what it felt like to have something you'd built your whole identity around ripped away. I did my research. The director of Tracy's play, the one who'd given her the break she dreamed about, was a guy in his early 30s with a growing reputation in the local theater scene. And through Chris's social media, which he'd been too careless to make private, I found something interesting. The director was tagged in photos with Chris. Couple photos. Vacation photos. Anniversary dinner photos? Chris wasn't just cheating on some random boyfriend. He was cheating on the man who controlled Tracy's career. I contacted the director. We met at a coffee shop. He was guarded at first, thought I was a jealous husband trying to sabotage a production. Then I showed him the video. Not all of it. Enough. He didn't say a word for a long time. Then he stood up, shook my hand, and left. By the end of that week, Tracy and Chris were both fired from the production. The director released a statement about creative differences. Tracy called me 17 times. I answered once. You destroyed everything I worked for. No, Tracy, you did that yourself. I just made sure the right people saw your best performance. The divorce papers arrived the same week she lost the role. She signed without a fight. I think the reality had finally broken through, even her talent for pretending. This happened last week and I finally dared to share it here because I have not been myself since the day I caught Tracy with those 2 guys. I don't know how all of this happened right under my nose. Eric keeps telling me I'll come out the other side. Maybe. But right now, I'm sitting in a quiet house that still smells faintly like her perfume, and the recording studio fund I emptied for her dreams is gone, and I'm 33 years old, starting from zero. The worst part isn't the betrayal. The worst part is that she was right about one thing: she really was a phenomenal actress. She played the role of loving wife so convincingly that I gave her a standing ovation every single day. I just didn't realize the show was never for me.
Story 5.
My husband smashed cake into my face at our wedding, knowing full well that the last person who did that gave me a scar on my forehead. He did it to impress my mother, the same mother who gave me that scar. So I left my own wedding in an Uber, wearing a frosting-covered dress filed for an annulment, And then his sister decided to tell me he'd been cheating on me for 6 months. Every single person I trusted showed me who they really were in the span of about 12 hours. I'm 27. My now ex-husband is Marcus. He's 29. My mother is Diane, and she's the reason I have a boundary about cake in the first place. Tanya is Marcus's sister, who apparently knew about the cheating the entire time. And Jess is my best friend, basically the only person I have left. Let me tell you about the scar first, because that's where everything starts. I was turning 17. Diane had promised times she wouldn't do the cake thing. Every year since I was maybe 8, it was her favorite party trick. Grab the back of my head, slam my face into whatever cake was in front of me and laugh, while I came up sputtering with frosting in my eyelashes. The whole family thought it was hilarious. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone howling while I stood there with buttercream in my nostrils, trying to smile so nobody would call me dramatic. But 17 was supposed to be different. I'd begged her the night before. Actually begged sitting on the edge of her bed while she scrolled through her phone. Please, Mom, not this year. I just want to blow out the candles like a normal person. She looked at me over her reading glasses. You're so sensitive. Fine, I won't touch your precious cake. The cake was from a bakery. 3 tiers because Diane liked to perform generosity in public. It had these decorative sugar flowers on top with wire stem stiff little metal pieces that held the petals in place. I remember thinking it was the most beautiful cake I'd ever had. I leaned in to blow out the candles. I felt her hand on the back of my skull before I even finished my wish. She drove my face straight down into the top tier. One of those wire stems caught me right above my left eyebrow and dragged a 2-inch gash across my forehead. I came up bleeding into the frosting, and for about 3 seconds the room was dead silent. Then Diane started laughing. Oh, stop it, it's barely a scratch. My aunt handed me a paper towel. Not a clean cloth, not ice, a paper towel. And the party continued. I got 4 stitches at urgent care. Diane told the nurse I'd tripped. I sat there watching her lie with dried frosting still crusted in my hair, and I thought, times, when I leave this house, I'm never letting anyone do that to me again. Asterisk. The scar faded but never disappeared. It sits just above my eyebrow, slightly raised, slightly lighter than the rest of my skin. I touch it sometimes without thinking, a little ridge that reminds me what promises from that woman are worth. I told Marcus about it on our 3rd date. We were watching videos on his phone, stupid stuff, memes, fail compilations, and one of those wedding cake smash videos came up. Bride gets a fistful of frosting shoved into her face, groom doubles over, laughing comments full of crying, laughing emojis. Marcus thought it was hilarious. I didn't laugh. He noticed. And I told him everything. Diane, the wire stem, the stitches, the paper towel. I showed him the scar. He ran his thumb over it and said, "That's messed up. I'd never do that to you." Then maybe a year later, another cake smash video. He showed it to me grinning, and I felt my stomach drop. Marcus, I need you to hear me. If you ever smash cake in my face, ever, I will leave you. I don't care if it's our wedding. I don't care if everyone's watching. I will walk out, and I will not come back. He put his hands up. Babe, relax. I should have listened to the Times relax, asterisk. Jess told me later she always flinched when he said that word to me. That's what people say when they want you to shrink, she said. But I didn't hear it then. I heard safety. I heard a man who was nothing like my mother. The wedding was exactly what I'd spent my whole life wanting. I planned every detail, like I was building a house I'd actually get to live in. Ivory linens. Candlelight. A string quartet during the ceremony, because I dreamed about that since I was 15. The cake was simple, 2 tiers, white fondant, real peonies on top. No wire, no sugar decorations. I'd chosen it carefully, and if that sounds paranoid, you now understand why. The ceremony was perfect. Marcus cried during his vows. I believed every word. The reception was loud and warm and full of people I thought loved me. Diane was there being her best public self, hugging me, telling everyone how proud she was, performing the role of devoted mother so convincingly that I almost let myself believe it. We cut the cake together. Cameras everywhere. I was smiling so hard my face ached. Then I felt his hand leave the knife. I felt it before I understood it, a fistful of cake, wet and heavy, slamming into the side of my face. Frosting in my eye, up my nose, smeared across the scar on my forehead. The exact same sensation. The exact same helplessness. Marcus was laughing. That big, open-mouthed laugh he does when he's performing for a room. You should see your face, he said. And behind him, I could hear Diane Times howling times with laughter, clapping her hands together, and I heard her voice cut through the noise. See, she's fine. She's always been too sensitive. The room was laughing. My family was laughing. His family was laughing. I stood there in my wedding dress with frosting dripping off my chin, and I touched the scar above my eyebrow, and something inside me clicked shut like a lock. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I set down my champagne glass, picked up my phone from the head table, and opened the Uber app. My hands were shaking so badly, it took 3 tries to type the address. Jess found me outside. What are you doing? Leaving. Okay, she said. No argument. No times are you sure, asterisk. Just. Okay, I'll get your bag from the hotel room. Call me when you're somewhere safe. The Uber driver looked at me in his rearview mirror, poofy white dress, mascara, running frosting smeared across my bodice, and to his credit, he said absolutely nothing. He just drove. My phone started buzzing before we hit the highway. Marcus. Diane. Numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it face down on the seat and watched the venue shrink in the side mirror. I didn't pick up the phone until the next morning, and that's when I found out the cake wasn't even the worst part. I picked up the phone at 6:47 a.m., still in my wedding dress. I'd fallen asleep on Jess's couch without changing because taking it off felt like admitting the day had actually happened. The bodice was stiff with dried frosting. It crackled when I sat up. 32 missed calls. 14 texts from Marcus escalating from confused to angry to something that was supposed to sound like concern but read like a man upset his audience had noticed the bride disappearing. I called him back. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me was still waiting for the apology that would make it make sense. He picked up on the first ring. Finally. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? You just times left, asterisk. In front of everyone. My mom was, you smashed cake in my face. It was a times joke, times babe. Everyone does it at weddings. You completely overreacted and made me look, you knew. I told you what she did to me. I showed you the scar. I told you I would leave. Silence? Then, why should I have to apologize because you can't take a joke? My hand was pressing against the scar. I didn't realize I was doing it until I felt the ridge under my fingertip. Marcus. Why did you do it? More silence. Longer this time. Then he said something that rearranged every memory I had of him. Your mom said it would be funny. She said you'd laugh about it later, that you always make a big deal out of nothing and then get over it. She said it would show her family that I'm not. He stopped. Not what? She said her side of the family thought I was too soft, that I let you control everything. She said if I did the cake thing, it would show them I wasn't whipped. I held the phone away from my ear and stared at it like it was something dead. Then I brought it back. You did it to impress Vase's Diane. I did it because your family already thinks I'm... You chose my mother over me. The woman who times scarred times me. You chose her. You're being. Say times dramatic asterisk. Say times sensitive asterisk. Go ahead. Use her exact words. You've been using them for years, and I just didn't hear it. He started talking faster the way he always did when he felt the room turning against him. Look, just come home and we'll figure this out. You're my times wife, asterisk. You can't just... I'm getting an annulment. Over times, cake times, you're going to throw away our entire... I hung up. My thumb was trembling so badly I almost missed the button. The calls came in waves after that. Coordinated, like they'd all gotten together and assigned shifts. Diane first. Of course. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. I listened to it once and then deleted it, but I can still recite it from memory because certain sentences burn themselves into you like brands. You are going to die alone. You know that, right? You push away everyone who tries to love you. Your looks are going to run out fast, and when they do, no one will want you. No one. You'll be alone, and you'll deserve it. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful. The voice of a woman who'd been waiting years for her daughter's happiness to crack so she could pour herself into the fracture. Then Tanya. Tanya, who I'd thought was my friend, who I'd taken shopping for her bridesmaid dress, who I'd sat with on Marcus's parents' porch drinking wine and talking about our futures like we were sisters. She called me a disgusting bitch. Those were her exact words. Said I was hurting her brother, wasting his time. That she wished he would have broken up with me 2 years ago when he first wanted to. That sentence landed like a slap. Asterisk. 2 years ago when he first wanted to. Asterisk. Then, and I think she did this because she figured the bridge was already burning and she might as well use the gasoline, she told me he'd been cheating on me 6 months with his ex who'd wanted him back. The ex eventually dropped him because he stayed with me, but for 6 months he'd been sleeping with someone else while I was picking out peonies for our wedding cake. Tanya knew. The whole time. She knew, and she sat across from me at brunch and complimented my engagement ring and never said a word. I guess she put everything out on the table since I was leaving anyway. I blocked them in order. Marcus first, then Diane, then Tanya, then aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone who'd laughed while frosting dripped off my chin. Everyone who'd laughed when I was 17. Everyone who'd handed me a paper towel instead of protecting me. My contact list got very short very fast. Jess came home that afternoon with a bag of my clothes she'd somehow retrieved from the hotel room. She set it by the couch and sat down next to me. You okay? He was cheating on me. She closed her eyes, let out a breath. I know this isn't the right time to say this. You saw something. I saw times, enough asterisk. I didn't have proof. I didn't want to be wrong and lose you. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. Don't. You're the only person who doesn't owe me an apology. She said I could stay with her for a few months until I got back on my feet. No timeline, no pressure. I filed for the annulment on Tuesday. The paperwork was surprisingly thin for the demolition of an entire life. I started therapy 3 weeks later. My therapist said something in our second session that I haven't stopped thinking about. You didn't marry someone different from your mother. You married someone your mother trained you to accept. Marcus never hit me. He never screamed. He just dismissed me gently, warmly, with that easy smile every time I tried to tell him who I was. And I mistook that gentleness for safety, because I'd only ever known the loud version of being ignored. I don't have a triumphant ending. I have a couch in my best friend's apartment and a therapist I see on Thursdays and a contact list with 4 names in it. I have a wedding dress in a garbage bag in Jess's closet that I can't bring myself to throw away or look at. I have a scar above my eyebrow that I touch every morning like a rosary. I have almost no one. But for the first time in my life, every person who's left actually gives a damn whether I'm okay. That's not a happy ending. But it's a clean one. And clean is more than I've ever had.
Story 6.
I'm not trying to say I'm a saint. I know what I did was wrong. My ex-husband Mark has probably told everyone his version where I'm the villain who threw our marriage away for some guy at work. And from the outside, I guess it looks that way. But stories are never that simple, are they? There's always the part you don't see. The quiet, lonely hours that lead up to the big explosion. Our marriage didn't die the day Mark found those texts. It had been dying a slow death for years, and I was just the one who finally pulled the plug. We got married young. I was 20 and he was 21. We were full of plans and ideas, thinking we had it all figured out. But life gets in the way. He got a good job, I got a job, and we settled into a routine. The problem with routine is that it can slowly sandpaper away all the interesting parts of a person until you're just left with a smooth, boring surface. I started to feel invisible. It wasn't one big thing, but 1,000 tiny cuts. It was him scrolling through his phone while I was telling him about my day. It was me making his favorite dinner and him not even noticing, just eating while watching TV. I'd ask him, "How was your day?" and get a fine. I'd try to start a conversation, maybe about a movie or something funny I saw online, and he'd give me a little nod, his eyes still glued to his screen. I felt like a ghost in my own house. I could have worn a clown suit to breakfast, and I don't think he would have looked up. The loneliness was the worst part. You can be in a room full of people and feel lonely, but there is no loneliness worse than sitting next to the person who is supposed to be your partner and feeling completely and utterly alone. The silence in our house was heavy. It wasn't a comfortable, peaceful silence. It was the silence of 2 strangers living in the same space, each inside their own little bubble. I tried. I really did. I suggested date nights, but we'd just end up at a restaurant, him on his phone, me staring at the breadbasket, wondering why I even bothered. I felt like I was starving, but for affection, for attention, for a simple conversation that didn't feel like a chore. Then Alex started at my work. He was just a guy in the next cubicle. At first, it was nothing. Just good morning and small talk by the coffee machine. But then he started to actually times C times me. He'd ask me a question and then actually listen to the answer. He noticed when I got a new haircut. He remembered I liked a certain kind of tea and would bring me a cup without me asking. They were such small things, but to a person dying of thirst, even a drop of water feels like an ocean. Our conversation started spilling over into texts. It was innocent at first. A funny meme about work, a complaint about our boss. Then it became more personal. We talked about our dreams, our frustrations, the things we were passionate about. I learned more about him in 2 weeks of texting than I'd learned about my own husband in the last 2 years. He made me laugh. A real deep belly laugh that I hadn't felt in forever. I would find myself smiling at my phone like a teenager. And a little piece of the old me. The me before the invisibility cloak started to come back. The feelings grew faster than I could control. I wasn't looking for an affair. I was just looking for a friend, a connection. But he was giving me everything I was missing at home. He made me feel smart and funny and seen. And yes, things got romantic. The texts went from friendly to flirty to more. One night, after a particularly long and silent evening with Mark, Alex and I were texting. He was telling me all the things he liked about me, and it was like he was listing everything Mark had stopped noticing years ago. In that moment, I felt so overwhelmed with gratitude and affection that I typed it. I love you. I know how that sounds, but it wasn't a lie. I loved the way he made me feel. I loved that he saw me. It was a desperate, messy kind of love, born out of loneliness. One day, we were talking about how empty my house felt when Mark was at work. Mark works long 12-hour shifts, so I'm alone a lot. Half joking, I said, Alex should come over for coffee sometime just to make the place feel less like a tomb. He agreed, saying he'd love to. We even picked a day. But as soon as I sent the text, a wave of panic and guilt washed over me. This was a line. A real physical line I was about to cross. My heart was pounding. I couldn't do it. A few hours later, my hands shaking, I texted him and told him it was a bad idea and we couldn't. He understood. He never came over. We never even saw each other outside of work. It was just a stupid plan that never happened. But the texting continued. It was my secret little world where I wasn't a ghost. It was my escape. Last night was a typical Tuesday. Mark was on the couch, controller in his hands, completely absorbed in his video game. I was on the other end of the couch, phone in my hands, texting Alex. He'd sent me a stupid joke and I was smiling. A real smile. I typed out a reply and set my phone face down on the coffee table while I got up to use the bathroom. It was just for a minute. A single, careless minute. When I came back into the living room, the sound from the TV was off. The only noise was the low hum of the refrigerator. Mark wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He had turned his whole body to face the empty spot on the couch where I'd been sitting. He was just staring at me. His face was completely blank, but his eyes. There was a look in his eyes I had never seen before. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something colder. Something broken. He didn't say a word. He just held up my phone. The screen was lit up. My heart dropped into my stomach. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the phone in his hand, my phone with my secret world lit up for him to see. I don't know which message was on the screen, the "I love you" or the one about Alex coming over. It didn't matter. They were all bad. "Who's Alex?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, which was so much scarier than if he had yelled. My own voice came out shaky. "He's just a guy from work, Mark. It's not what you think." He let out a short, bitter laugh. It was a sound I'd never heard him make before. "Not what I think. It says, 'I love you.' It says he was going to come here, to our house, while I was at work." What am I supposed to think? And that's when the dam broke. All the years of frustration, of feeling invisible, of being so lonely I thought I would scream it all, came pouring out. "What were you supposed to think?" "I don't know, Mark. When was the last time you even looked at me? When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer?" "This has nothing to do with that," he shouted, finally finding his volume. He stood up, pacing back and forth in the small space between the couch and the TV. "You cheated on me! You were texting another man! You love him!" I was lonely, I screamed back, tears streaming down my face now. I felt like a piece of furniture in my own home. I would talk, and the words would just hit a wall. "You were here, but you were a million miles away in that stupid game or on your phone." "Alex? He actually saw me." "He talked to me." "So you were going to bring him into our bed?" he spat. And the words hit me like a slap. "He never came over. I told him not to. It was a stupid idea that I stopped. It was just texting, Mark. It was words because I couldn't get any from you." The fight went on for hours. It was ugly. We threw every resentment we had at each other, from the big things to the stupid petty things. He saw a liar and a cheater. I saw a man who had let our marriage starve to death and was only now noticing the body. By the end of it, we were both exhausted. There were no more tears or yelling, just a hollow, empty feeling in the room. We were broken. And for the first time, we both knew it. A few days later, after sleeping in separate rooms and barely speaking, he came to me and said, "We should try therapy." I think he expected me to say no to prove I didn't want to fix things. But I agreed. A tiny, foolish part of me hoped that maybe a stranger could translate for us, could make him understand what I had been trying to say for years. The therapy session was a disaster. We sat on a beige couch in a quiet office that smelled like old books. The therapist was a kind-looking woman who asked us to share our feelings. Mark went first. He calmly explained that I'd had an emotional affair, that I'd betrayed his trust. He laid out the facts, the text, the "I love you," the plan for a visit. It sounded so clinical, so simple. He was the victim, I was the villain. Then it was my turn. I tried to explain the loneliness, the invisibility. I tried to tell her about the silence, about feeling like a ghost. I stumbled over my words, trying to make her and Mark understand the deep ache that led me to it. But I could see the look on Mark's face. He wasn't hearing me. He was just hearing excuses. He crossed his arms, staring at the floor. The therapist nodded and said, "Trust is a very difficult thing to rebuild." It felt like she was siding with him, like the why didn't matter, only the what. I left that office feeling more hopeless than ever. We had spent an hour and $200 just to confirm what we already knew: we were on completely different planet. That night, the house was silent again. But it was a new kind of silence. It was the silence of defeat. I sat on the couch, the same one where it had all blown up. And I felt that familiar loneliness creep back in colder and sharper this time. And I did something stupid. I picked up my phone. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was the worst thing I could possibly do. But it was a compulsion, like scratching an itch until it bleeds. I needed to feel seen just for a second. I sent Alex a simple text: "I'm not okay." His reply came back almost instantly: "I'm here if you want to talk." And that was it. That's all it took. The therapy hadn't fixed the root problem. It just put a bandage on a gaping wound. Mark couldn't give me what I needed. The therapist couldn't give me what I needed. But Alex could. So I went back to the only source of water I could find in the desert, even though I knew it was poison. I don't know if Mark found out I was texting him again or if he just felt it. Maybe he could see that the tiny spark of hope we had was gone. About a week later, he sat down with me at the kitchen table. There was no anger left in his face, just a deep, unshakable sadness. "This isn't working, is it?" he said softly. I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "No. I don't think I can ever trust you again," he said. "And you're not happy. I see that now." It was the most honest thing he'd said to me in years. He finally saw me. But it was too late. We talked for a little while about logistics, about who would get what. It was calm and quiet. The fight was over. We were just two people who had hurt each other too much to go back. We decided to get a divorce. I'm not trying to say I'm a good person. I know I hurt him. I see that. I will carry the guilt of that with me forever. But I'm not the simple villain he probably paints me as. I'm just a person who made a terrible mistake because I was drowning and grabbed onto the wrong life raft. Our marriage was a house that was already rotting from the inside. I didn't set the fire, but I was the one holding the match when it all burned down.
Story 7.
My husband, Mark, probably told you I'm cheating on him. He probably made himself sound like the perfect wronged husband who provides everything only to be betrayed by his ungrateful wife. He's good at painting that picture. It's a work of art he's been perfecting for years with him as the stoic, muscular hero and me as the pretty, slightly unstable accessory on his arm. Let me tell you my side. Our life looks perfect on paper. Mark makes 6 figures. We live in a nice house, have 2 nice cars, and are completely debt-free. He'd list these things off like he was reading his stock portfolio, and in his mind, that's his husbandly duty complete. He even does most of the housework. It's not a partnership, though. It's a performance. Every time he scrubs the counters or perfectly lines up the vacuum marks on the carpet, it's a silent announcement. See? I'm even better at this than you are. I started to feel less like a wife and more like a poorly performing asset he had to manage. We ended up in couples counseling because I was unhappy, which to him was a completely illogical state of being. Why would I be unhappy? He provided. He cleaned. He went to the gym and maintained the handsome physique I'd married. In our sessions, he'd talk about the weight of his feelings and how hard he worked while the therapist nodded. When I tried to explain the crushing loneliness, the feeling of being a ghost in my own home, it was dismissed. My deep, aching sadness was just stubbornness. I felt myself getting smaller and smaller, my voice quieter, my world shrinking to the pristine, silent walls of our home. That's why I took the new job. It was an executive position at a fast-growing IT company, a place with real pressure and real stakes. It was a lifeline. It was my chance to build something that was mine to be valued. For my brain, my strategy, my ideas. Not for how well I complemented Mark's perfect life. The energy at the office was like a drug. It was a world away from the silent order of my house. It's a place filled with sharp, ambitious people. Mark pictured it as some casual tech startup with guys in hoodies playing ping pong. It's not. It's a corporate battleground, and you're expected to dress for the part. So I did. I retired my old tired cardigans and bought tailored blazers, silk blouses and heels that made me feel powerful. I started getting my hair professionally styled. I learned how to do my makeup to look polished and awake, not like the weary ghost I saw every morning. For the first time in almost a decade, I didn't hate looking in the mirror. I felt like myself again. The culture is intense, but the rewards are too. Success is celebrated loudly. When my team landed a massive new client, after a month of sleepless nights, our CEO, Daniel, ordered a celebratory lunch for the whole team from a Michelin star restaurant. He didn't just order pizza, he ordered an experience. I brought home the leftovers duck confit and truffle risotto, thinking Mark and I could share it, that he could taste a piece of my victory. When we smashed our quarterly targets, every single person on the leadership team got a $100 gift card and a bottle of expensive wine. These weren't hush-hush payments. They were trophies, symbols of our hard work. I brought them home to share them, hoping he'd see them and think, wow, my wife is killing it. I'm so proud. I wanted him to be part of my new exciting world. But he never saw it that way. He'd look at the fancy restaurant bag with a weird tightness in his jaw. The expensive wine would be put on the rack without a word. The gift cards would be tossed on the counter as if they were tainted. His suspicion was like a poison gas, colorless and odorless, slowly filling every room in our house. A few weeks ago, Daniel hosted a strategy dinner for the senior executives at his home. He's divorced a brilliant guy who lives and breathes the company. He's tough, but he respects me and listens to my ideas, treating me like the competent professional he hired me to be. His house was stunning. It was modern with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was everything I'd been dreaming of for us. Spacious, full of light, a place where you could really live and entertain. I kept thinking about the cramped little patio we had and the kitchen I wanted to renovate. This was possible. This was the kind of life hard work could buy. I was so excited, so inspired. I discreetly took a couple of pictures on my phone of the incredible view from his kitchen and the open-plan living area, not to be weird, but to show Mark. I wanted to say, "Look at this, we could do this. This is what I'm working for times us, asterisk." When I got home that night, he was already in bed pretending to be asleep. The next day, I tried to show him the pictures, my phone in my hand, my voice bubbling with excitement. "You have to see the house my boss has I started. It's incredible. The view from the kitchen alone is..." He didn't even glance at the phone at first. He just looked at me. His face, which used to look at me with love, was a cold, hard mask. "Your boss's house?" he said, his voice flat. "Yeah, Daniel. He had the leadership team over for dinner." "Look," I said, pushing the phone toward him. He took it and swiped through the two photos. There was no wonder in his eyes, no shared dream. Just a dark, gathering storm. He handed the phone back to me, his fingers barely touching mine. "So you're spending your evenings inside his house now," he stated. Not as a question, but as an accusation. My heart sank. It wasn't about a house, or a dream, or our future. In his mind, my success wasn't ours. It was mine. And it was a threat. Every bottle of wine, every gift card, every late night at the office was being collected and filed away as evidence for a trial that was already happening in his head. And these pictures, the ones I took, with so much hope for our future, had just become his star exhibits. I just stared at him, the phone feeling heavy and cold in my hand. My excitement evaporated, replaced by a familiar sinking feeling of dread. It was a team dinner, Mark. For the senior leadership. There were 6 of us there. At his house, he pressed his arms crossed over his chest. That was his power stance, the one that said, "I am the reasonable one here and you are being hysterical." Why his house? Why not a restaurant? "I don't know, because he wanted to. It was nicer than any restaurant," I said, my voice rising in frustration. "You're completely missing the point. The point wasn't times whose times house it was. The point was times the house itself, asterisk. What we could build. What I'm working towards. For us." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "For us? Don't lie to me. This whole new you isn't for us. The expensive clothes, the makeup, spending hours on your hair. Who is that for, huh? Because you sure as hell don't do it on the weekends when it's just me." Every accusation was a perfectly aimed dart, and they all hit their mark. All the little resentments he'd been collecting were finally being brought out for display. The fancy leftovers, the gift cards, the late nights. He listed them off one by one, his voice getting colder with each item. That $100 gift card. The ridiculously expensive wine. You think I'm stupid. You think I don't see what's happening. That's when I snapped. The exhaustion from work, the constant feeling of being misunderstood, the loneliness, it all boiled over. "What do you think is happening, Mark?" I yelled, throwing my hands up in the air. "Do you think I'm part of some corporate cult? No, I'm part of a successful company that rewards its employees. For the first time in 10 years, I feel like I matter for something other than being Mrs. Mark last name. I feel smart. I feel capable. I'm sorry if that's an inconvenience for you. I give you everything? He shot back, his voice booming in our pristine, quiet living room. A 6-figure life, no debt, you wanted for nothing. I even do all the chores. What more could you possibly want? There it was. The performance. The list of his contributions as if our marriage was a business transaction and he had more than fulfilled his side of the contract. I want a partner, not a CEO of our household, I screamed, tears finally starting to burn in my eyes. I don't want a husband who vacuums as a way to prove a point. I want someone who asks me about my day and actually listens. I want someone who sees me, the person, not just a line item in his portfolio of success. When we're in therapy, you talk about the weight of your feelings, but when I try to talk about mine, you call it stubbornness. Do you have any idea how it feels to be erased in your own home? His face went rigid. The self-righteous anger was replaced by something darker, something uglier. He took a step toward me, his voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. Are you sleeping with him? The air went out of my lungs. Of all the things he could have thought of, all the ways he could have twisted my newfound happiness, he went there, to the easiest, most insulting conclusion. What did you just say? I whispered, my whole body trembling. Daniel, your boss, the brilliant divorced man in the big empty house. Are you sleeping with him? Is that why he's giving you all these gifts? Is that what you have to do to get ahead? The slap was a reflex. I didn't even think about it. My hand just flew up and connected with his cheek. The sound of it echoed in the silence that followed. We both stood there frozen and breathing heavily, staring at each other in shock. The man I had loved for a decade was looking at me like I was a stranger, a whore who had just been caught. And I was looking at a man whose insecurity was so deep, so consuming, that he would rather believe I was a cheater than believe I was simply successful on my own. I didn't say another word. I turned, walked into our guest room, and locked the door. The next few days were a special kind of hell. We moved around each other in our perfect house like ghosts with unfinished business. The silence was thick and suffocating. Every morning I would get ready for work, putting on my armor, the blazer, the heels, the confident makeup, and every glance he shot my way was filled with poison. Work, my one safe place, now felt tainted. I'd be in a meeting with Daniel discussing quarterly projections, and a part of my brain would scream times, Mark thinks you're sleeping with this man. Asterisk. It was humiliating. We had a counseling session that Thursday. The entire drive there was silent. I half expected him to turn the car around. When we sat down on the familiar couch in the therapist's office, Mark didn't wait to be asked. He just started talking, laying out his case like a prosecutor in a courtroom. He spoke calmly and logically, which made it all the more chilling. He presented his evidence, my new wardrobe, the late nights, the gifts, and finally Exhibit A, the pictures of the inside of my CEO's house. He presented it all as an open and shut case of infidelity. I just sat there numb. I didn't defend myself. What was the point? He wasn't interested in the truth. He was interested in his story, the one where he was the perfect wronged husband. The story where finally the therapist turned to me. What do you have to say to this? I took a deep breath and looked at Mark. Really looked at him. At the man who measured his love in dollars and his partnership in completed chores. The man who needed to be the provider, the hero, the stronger one. I finally understood. He's right, I said, my voice quiet but clear. The therapist looked surprised. Mark looked vindicated. Everything he's saying is right from his point of view. He can't imagine any other reason for me to change. He can't comprehend that I might want to build something for myself. That my worth isn't tied to his income or his approval. He sees my success. Not as our success, but as a threat to his position. As the head of this household. I turned my body to face Mark fully. This isn't about Daniel. This has never been about another man. This is about you. You're terrified. You're so blinded by this role you've created for yourself that you can't see me anymore. Our marriage isn't failing because I'm looking for a way out. It's failing because I'm finally building a sense of self. And you can't stand that it has nothing to do with you. I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if he can ever unsee the ugly picture he's painted. To save our marriage, I'd have to shrink myself back down to become the ghost in the house again. And I don't think I can do that. I'm not sure I want to. He thinks I'm cheating on him with my boss. The truth is, I'm cheating on the quiet, unhappy woman I used to be, with the person I'm finally becoming. And I think that's what he really can't forgive.
Story 8.
Okay, so I know my ex has probably been all over the internet painting me as some kind of monster. The cheating, toxic girlfriend who broke him. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an angel. I messed up. I did things I'm not proud of. But you're only getting his side of the story, and his side leaves out the 5 years of hell that came before it all blew up. I met him when I was 19. He was 26. To a 19-year-old, a guy in his mid-20s with a real job and his own apartment seems like the most stable, mature person on the planet. He promised to take care of me, and at first, that's what it felt like. His attention felt like love. He'd text me all day, want to know what I was doing, who I was with. It felt like he really, truly cared. But slowly over time, care started to feel like a cage. His questions turned into interrogations. My phone wasn't mine anymore. It was a piece of evidence he was constantly examining. If I posted a picture on Instagram and a guy I barely knew from a high school class liked it, it would be a whole conversation. Who's that? Why is he liking your picture? Do you talk to him? He'd say it was because he didn't trust Times. Other guys. Times. But the message I heard was loud and clear. He didn't trust Times. Me asterisk. Then came the rules. He had so many rules, all disguised as him protecting me. No guy friends was the big one. He'd say they all just wanted to sleep with me. and he was just looking out for our relationship. I couldn't go to a bar or a club with my girlfriends unless he was there to supervise. He wasn't my boyfriend. He was my warden. When we would go out together, I could feel his anxiety radiating off him. His eyes would dart around the room, not looking at me, but looking for threats. If a guy at the bar smiled in my direction, his whole body would tense up. He'd grab my hand a little too tight and pull me closer, whispering something angry. Like, "What was that about?" As if I had personally sent the guy an invitation. I started to shrink. I made myself smaller to avoid setting him off. I'd look at the floor when I walked. I stopped laughing too loudly. I wore baggy clothes so no one would look at me. He loved me most when I was quiet, when I was a doll on his shelf that only existed for him. The constant pressure, the feeling of being watched 24/7 was exhausting. I was 22 years old, and I felt like I was suffocating slowly, forgetting who I was when he wasn't looking. The only validation I got from him was when I was being a good girl, and that meant being invisible to the rest of the world. A few times I tried to push back. I'd have a flirty, harmless chat with someone online. It was stupid, just a stupid little secret to feel like I was my own person. Of course, he always found out. He'd go through my phone while I was sleeping and then wake me up to a full-blown investigation. Each time he caught me, the cage got smaller, and his paranoia got bigger. When we finally decided to take some space, it was like someone finally opened a window in a stuffy room. It was the beginning of lockdown, and for the first time in 5 years, I was completely alone. It was scary, but it was also the most freeing feeling in the world. My phone was just my phone. I could text who I wanted. I could exist without being monitored. I started talking to people online, just random guys. And for the first time, they saw me. Not his girlfriend, not a possession to be careful around, but just me. A girl. The attention was a drug. You're beautiful from a stranger felt more real than any compliment he'd ever given me, because it wasn't conditional. Sending a selfie that was a little flirty, or even an underwear pic, gave me this jolt of power. I know how that sounds. It was reckless and messy, but these were my choices. They were my mistakes to make. I was finally driving my own life, even if I was driving it straight into a ditch. I got tangled up with a coach from my old gym online. It was all texting, just sexting back and forth. Fantasy. It was safe because it wasn't real. It was an escape, a way to feel desired without the weight of possession that always came with my ex. Then, when things started opening up again, I met another guy. Also a coach from a different gym. We just hung out as friends at first. He was so easy to be around. He didn't analyze everything I said. He didn't watch me like a hawk. He just liked me. He thought I was funny. We were just sitting in his car one night talking, and he kissed me. I didn't pull away. In that moment, my ex didn't even exist in my head. I just felt present. I felt like a 24-year-old girl, not a piece of property. It went too far. We made out, and I gave him a hand job over his pants. It was a stupid, impulsive moment of weakness. But it was a moment where I felt wanted, not owned. Right around then, my ex came crawling back into my life. He missed me. He loved me. He couldn't live without me. We started talking again every day for about a month. And all the old feelings came rushing back, the guilt, the familiarity, the obligation. I felt myself slipping back into the old patterns. But I had tasted freedom, and I was terrified of losing it again. My head was a mess. Part of me wanted the security he offered, and the other part was screaming at me to run. I saw the gym coach one more time. It was just 3 days before my ex and I were supposed to see each other in person, to sleep together and make things official again. I don't know why I did it. It felt like a last panicked gasp for air before the cage door slammed shut for good. It was self-sabotage. It was chaotic and wrong. A few days later, he came over. I knew something was wrong. He was quiet, and his eyes had that dark, stormy look they got when he was about to start an interrogation. I cleaned up, made us drinks, tried to act normal, but the air was so thick you could barely breathe. He just sat there on the couch staring at me. My heart was pounding out of my chest. After a few minutes of unbearable silence, he finally looked right at me and said it. "We need to talk. I feel like you're hiding something from me. I just need you to be honest. Whatever it is, just tell me the truth and we can work through it together." We can work through it together. The words hung in the air, and for one stupid, hopeful second, I actually believed him. I thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is the moment we stop the games, stop the interrogations and the secrets, and actually talk about why our relationship was so broken. I thought if I just ripped the Band-Aid off, if I showed him all my ugly, messy feelings and the stupid things they made me do, we could finally address the real problem. His suffocating control and my desperate, clumsy rebellion. I thought honesty was a bridge. I was so naive. So I took a deep breath and I started talking. I told him everything. I started with the online stuff during our space, the sexting with the first gym coach, the underwear photos I'd sent to a couple of other guys. I watched his face as I spoke, and it wasn't crumbling with pain. Not yet. It was hardening. His eyes got this cold, clinical look, like a detective who just found the clue he was looking for. It was like he was thinking I knew it. I was right all along. He just stared at me. "Is that it?" My stomach dropped. I knew this was the point of no return. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "There's more." I told him about the other coach, the one I met up with. I told him we hung out, that he made me laugh, that I felt normal. I told him we kissed. That's when I saw the pain. It was a sharp, quick flash in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold focus. He wasn't crying. He was calculating. "What else happened?" he demanded. His voice was flat, but the pressure behind it was immense. "Be honest. You said you would be honest." So I told him the rest. handjob over his pants. The whole pathetic, messy story. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. When? I looked at the floor. A few days ago. How many days? 3. I mumbled. 3 days before you came over tonight. That was the bomb. That was what truly shattered him. It wasn't just that I had done it. It was that I had done it while I was talking to him, leading him on, letting him believe we had a future. In his mind, I had planned it. It was a malicious, calculated betrayal. The truth was so much messier. It was a moment of panic and self-destruction, but he couldn't see that. He didn't yell not at first. He just sort of deflated. Then the questions started and they didn't stop. It wasn't, why did you feel so lonely, or what was wrong with us? It was, what did he look like? Was he muscular? More muscular than me? What kind of car did he drive? What were you wearing? Where were his hands when you kissed him? Tell me. Exactly what he said to you. He was forcing me to recount every single detail. He made me paint him a mental movie of my cheating, and I could see he was playing it over and over in his head, torturing himself with every frame. My confession wasn't a first step toward healing. It was just a script he could use to fuel his own humiliation. He wasn't my partner who I'd hurt. He was an owner whose prized possession had been damaged, and he was obsessively inspecting the dents. He kept circling back to the same thing over and over. Why him? Was it because I'm not sexy enough? Because I don't have a six-pack? His voice was cracking, and he was begging me to validate his deepest insecurity, the one that had been driving his jealousy for 5 years. He needed me to tell him he was right to be paranoid. He needed this to be about his body, about something he could understand. I was completely drained. I had nothing left. I had confessed my deepest shames, and all he could do was obsess over another man's muscles. In a moment of pure emotional exhaustion, I just wanted the interrogation to stop. I wanted him to focus that obsessive, relentless energy on something, anything else. And that's when I said it. The stupidest, clumsiest thing I could have possibly said. Then why don't you start working out? I swear to God, I didn't mean it as an insult. It wasn't a jab. It was a desperate plea. It meant, please go fix yourself. Go build your own confidence. Go channel this crazy energy into something productive so you can stop tearing yourself apart in front of me. But of course, that's not what he heard. He heard, you're right. You're a weak, ugly loser, and that other guy was so much hotter than you. It was the confirmation he'd been digging for all night. That was the end. The real end. He just looked at me with this empty, broken expression and said, I can't even look at you. We broke up right there on the couch. He says he lost his normal self that night, but he was never normal with me. His normal was suspicion. His normal was control. His normal was looking at me and seeing a threat, a liability. I didn't destroy him. I just finally gave him the proof he had been looking for all along. I gave him a villain for his story. The weeks after were their own kind of hell. He'd text and call constantly, sometimes crying, sometimes screaming. He kept asking for more details, as if getting every last drop of poison out of me would somehow be the antidote. I finally had to block his number. Not just for me, but for him too. He was addicted to the pain, and I was his dealer. I know I'm not innocent here. I hurt him. I was a coward. I should have left him years ago instead of seeking validation in cheap, reckless ways. I own my mistakes, and I'll carry the guilt of them. But I am not the monster he paints me as. His love was a cage he built around me to soothe his own insecurities, and I just did what any caged animal would eventually do. I chewed off my own foot to get free. We were toxic. Maybe he was the poison and I was the sickness it caused. All I know is that I'm finally out. I'm finally breathing air that doesn't feel like it belongs to him. The cage door is open, and I am never, ever letting anyone lock me back inside.
Story 9.
I'm the ex-girlfriend who took the wedding money. I know what you've all probably heard, and I know how it sounds. I'm the crazy, cheating girl who emptied our joint account to run off with some guy I met in a video game. I get it. It sounds terrible. But you've only heard his side of the story. You heard about the numbers, the bank statements. You haven't heard about the 6 years before that, or the 1 year that broke everything. For 6 years, Mark and I were a team. Not just a couple, a team. We did everything together. We finished each other's sentences, we knew each other's takeout orders by heart, and we planned our whole future on a dozen napkins in our favorite diner. We were going to get married, buy a small house with a yard for a dog, and just be happy. It was simple, and it was all I ever wanted. Then came the job offer in September 2019. It was a huge opportunity for him, a major step up in his career. The only catch was that it was in a city 5 hours away. He sold it to me as a sacrifice. "This is for us," he'd say, holding my hands. "I'll work like crazy for a few years. We'll save up and we can have the wedding of our dreams. It's for our future." I believed him. I loved him, so of course I believed him. So he moved. And I stayed behind in our apartment, the one we'd picked out together. At first it was hard, but manageable. He'd come home every other weekend, and we'd have a flurry of dates and catch-up sessions before he had to leave again. But the job was demanding. The 1-2 hour shifts he'd mentioned weren't an exaggeration. Soon every other weekend became once a month if I'm lucky. The phone calls changed too. They went from long late-night talks about our feelings and our day to quick 5-minute check-ins while he was on his break. He was always tired. He'd ask how I was, but before I could really answer, he'd launch into a story about his work, his boss, his projects, the annoying guy in the next cubicle. I became a sounding board for his new life, a life I had no part in. Meanwhile, I was living in a museum of our old life. His stuff was still in the closet. His favorite mug was still in the cabinet. And I was supposed to be planning our dream wedding. Alone. I picked the venue by myself, sending him blurry photos for his approval. I went to cake tasting, and brought home little boxes of samples to eat by myself on the couch. I spent hours on the phone with caterers and florists, making decisions for a party of 2 when one of us wasn't even there. The big, beautiful wedding binder he bought me sat on the coffee table, a constant reminder of the future I was building by myself. I wasn't his partner anymore. I felt like his project manager. The loneliness was the worst part. It was like a constant, low hum in the background of my life. It was there when I woke up in our too-big bed, and when I came home from work to a dark, quiet apartment. To fill the silence, I started playing this stupid city-building game on my phone. It was just a way to pass the time, to turn my brain off for a few hours. The game had a global chat feature, and that's where I met him. I'm not even going to use his name because he isn't the point. He was just a guy from another country who happened to be online when I was. It started with tips about the game, but soon we were just talking. He'd ask about my day, and he would actually listen to the answer. He thought my wedding planning stories were funny, not boring. He made me laugh. He was just there. He was present in a way Mark hadn't been for a year. It wasn't some magical whirlwind romance. It was just a conversation. It was a lifeline. I felt like I had been holding my breath for a year, and he was the first person who told me it was okay to breathe. The realization that my relationship with Mark was over didn't come in one big moment. It was a slow, painful death. The final straw was when I called him excited because I thought I'd found the perfect band for the wedding. He cut me off mid-sentence. "Babe, I can't talk about this right now. I'm swamped. Just pick whichever one you think is best. I trust you." He thought he was empowering me. But what I heard was, "I don't care." I ended things a week later over the phone. It was awful. I tried to explain the distance, the loneliness, how I felt like we were just business partners managing a long-distance project called Our Future. I told him I'd connected with someone else, someone who actually saw me. Of course, all he heard was that I was leaving him for a guy I met in a game. He called me delusional. He said I was throwing away 6 years for a fantasy. Maybe he was right. But our relationship already felt like a fantasy. The only difference was my new one didn't make me feel so alone. After we hung up, I just sat there numb. Then I remembered the account. Our joint wedding savings account. I logged in, my hands shaking. The balance was a little over $6, $200. I looked at that number and I didn't see the money he'd worked so hard for. I saw my time. I saw every single night. I cried myself to sleep. Every dinner I ate alone. Every time I had to answer the question, "So when's the big day?" with a fake smile. I saw the 6 years of my life I'd poured into a future that had just vanished. In that moment, something inside me just snapped. He had his new career, his new life. He was moving forward. What was I left with? An empty apartment and a wedding binder full of broken promises. The money felt like the only tangible thing I had left from our relationship. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about worth. He thought a few monthly transfers into an account made up for his absence. I felt like I was owed for the emotional labor for being the one who kept our dream alive long after he'd outsourced it to me. It was my severance pay. That's what I told myself. A payment for 6 years of my life. I transferred the entire amount to my personal account. The screen flashed success. And for a second, I felt nothing. Then a wave of panic and regret washed over me so strong it made me sick. I knew what I had done. I knew it was wrong. But it was done. His text started a few hours later. First confusion, then pure rage. He called me a thief. A liar. He said he was going to destroy me. I blocked his number, my heart pounding in my chest. I spent the next day and a daze, alternating between crying and feeling this horrible, defiant anger. I didn't know what he would do, but I knew it wouldn't be pretty. This morning, my phone rang. It wasn't him. It was my dad. His voice was quiet, the way it gets when he's not just angry, but deeply, truly disappointed. "We need to talk," he said. "Mark called me. He told me everything." My stomach dropped. "He told you everything?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Of course he had. He'd told my father times, his times, everything. "Get dressed. You're coming over to the house now," he said, and hung up. There was no room for argument. The drive to my parents' house was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I rehearsed what I would say. I would explain the loneliness, the year of feeling like a ghost in my own life. I would talk about the emotional labor, the wedding I planned alone. I wouldn't try to excuse taking the money, but I would give it context. I thought I was going to have a difficult conversation with my dad. What I walked into was an ambush. I opened the front door and saw them all sitting in the living room like a jury. My dad in his armchair, my mom on the edge of the sofa, looking terrified. And across from them, Mark. He wasn't alone. He'd brought his parents. They all looked up at me as I walked in their faces, a mixture of stone-cold anger and pity. I felt like a child who had been called to the principal's office. The air was so thick with tension I could barely breathe. My dad just pointed to the empty chair next to my mom. "Sit down." Mark's father started, but my mom cut him off. "Mark, what she did was wrong," she began, her voice shaking, but trying to be strong. "But you have to understand what she's been through. She has been so lonely this past year. Planning a wedding by yourself while you were busy. It takes a toll." She felt abandoned. It was the wrong thing to say. I could see it on their faces. Mark's mother scoffed quietly. To them, my mom's words didn't sound like an explanation. They sounded like a childish excuse. It just made me look spoiled and weak, as if loneliness was a good enough reason to steal thousands of dollars. My mom was trying to defend me, but she was just digging a deeper hole for us both. Mark held up a hand, calm and collected. He was in his element. This was a business negotiation now. "I understand you're upset," he said, "not to me, but to my father. I am too. We can talk about feelings later. Right now, I just want to resolve the issue of the money." He pulled out a folder. Inside were neatly printed bank statements. He had highlighted every single transfer he'd made into the wedding account since we opened it. He had dates, amounts, everything. Cold, hard facts. He wasn't there to talk about the 6 years we spent together. He wasn't there to understand why I was heartbroken. He was there to collect a debt. My total contribution to that account, he said, his voice flat and even, was $4,823. The rest was from her contributions and a little bit of interest. He passed the statements to my father. My dad, a man who understands numbers better than he understands emotions, studied them for a long moment. I watched my entire 6-year relationship get reduced to a ledger sheet in my father's hands. Every sacrifice I'd made, every tear I'd cried, every lonely night erased. All that mattered were the numbers on that page. Mark even took out his phone. You can log into my bank app on your phone if you want to verify it yourself, sir. It was the ultimate humiliation, proving my theft to my own father on his own phone. My dad didn't even look at me. He just nodded slowly and handed the papers back to Mark. She'll pay you back, he said. All of it. The $4,800. He couldn't even say the full number. I'll work out a payment plan with her. You'll get your money. And that was it. Case closed. The tribunal had reached its verdict. Mark had won. He had proven I was a thief, and in doing so, he had completely ignored the reason I'd done it. My family saw it too. They didn't see a woman who had been driven to a desperate, stupid act by a year of emotional neglect. They just saw the numbers. They saw the crime. Mark and his parents left shortly after that. There were no goodbyes. The car ride home with my parents was silent. It was a horrible, heavy silence, worse than any shouting match could ever be. When we got to my apartment, my dad turned off the car, but didn't make a move to get out. I don't even know who you are anymore, he said, staring straight ahead at the windshield. We didn't raise you to be a thief. Dad, please, I begged, tears finally streaming down my face. It wasn't about the money. He left me. He was gone for a year, and he just expected me to wait and plan a party. I don't want to hear it, he cut me off. You can feel however you want to feel. It doesn't give you the right to take what isn't yours. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed your mother. You embarrassed yourself. I was left with nothing to say. He was right about the act, but so wrong about the cause. He had agreed to a payment plan. He would pay Mark directly every month, and I would pay him back. I was a 8-year-old woman, put on an allowance by her father to pay back the man I was supposed to marry. The weeks that followed were the loneliest of my life. My relationship with my parents is strained. We talk, but it's different. There's a wall of disappointment between us that I don't know how to break down. They look at me and see a liability, a problem they had to solve. And the online guy, it faded just as Mark said it would. Once real life came crashing down, the fantasy of our little online world couldn't hold up. We stopped talking a few weeks after the intervention. He was a symptom of my loneliness, a temporary fix for a much bigger problem. He was never the point. The point was the emptiness Mark left behind. I know I was wrong. I know taking the money was a stupid, impulsive, and illegal thing to do. I live with that regret every single day. I'm paying the money back. And I'm paying for my mistake in a dozen other ways too. But I'm not the villain he painted me as. I'm not a cold, calculating thief. I'm just the woman who spent 6 years building a future with a man only to be told that my time, my effort, and my heart weren't worth as much as the numbers on his bank statement. He took my future, so I took the money. We both know we can never get either of them back.
Story teen.
My husband has left me. My own daughter won't speak to me. They're all over there at her house, probably talking about what a monster I am. And I know if you're reading this, you'll probably agree with them. But you don't know my girls. You don't know my family. I'm the one who built it. And I'm the only one who seems to remember that a family is supposed to take care of its own. I have 2 daughters, and they couldn't be more different. My eldest, the one who is causing all this trouble, has always been the strong one. She's like a tank. Whatever she wants, she gets. A good husband, a nice house, a career she could just drop without a second thought. And kids. My God, the kids. 4 of them. She just pops them out one after the other like it's nothing. She makes it all look so easy, and I think she's forgotten that for some people it's not. My youngest, my baby, is different. She has a softer heart. The world bruises her more easily. She's had to fight for everything, for her grades in school, for jobs, for relationships. I've always had to watch over her, to be her shield. It's a mother's job to see where things aren't fair and to try and make them right. And life has never been fair to my youngest. The day she called me about the doctor's appointment was the worst day of my life. I heard a sound on the phone I hadn't heard since she was a little girl who'd fallen off her bike. That raw, hopeless sob. The doctor had told her it was over. She was infertile. The word itself is ugly. Final. All her dreams of a family, of a baby to hold, just gone. It felt like a part of me had been declared barren, too. I looked at my life, at my 2 girls, and all I could see was this terrible imbalance. One daughter's house was so full of life it was bursting, while my other daughter was facing a future that was just empty. Quiet house. A lonely life. It was wrong. A cosmic mistake. And I knew right then that it was my job to fix it. The solution was right there inside our own family. It was so simple, so perfect. My eldest, for all her faults, is a wonderful mother. Pregnancy suits her. She glows. It's a gift, a talent her body has. So I helped my youngest find the words. I coached her. This wasn't some huge, awful thing to ask. It wasn't like asking for a lung. It was asking her to use her gift, the one she had in abundance, to help her own sister, to give her a chance at the happiness that came so easily to her. We knew she'd had a difficult time with her last baby. Honestly, it sounded like a lot of drama to me. She complained about bed rest and high blood pressure, but at the end of the day, she was fine and the baby was fine. That's what matters. The past is the past. A few uncomfortable months in exchange for a lifetime of joy for her sister. It seemed like such a small price to pay. Her no was like a door slamming in our faces. It was so fast, so cold. There was no hesitation. She didn't even pretend to think about it. She started talking about risks, about her health, about how she needed to be there for the 4 children she already had, as if we were asking her to sacrifice herself. It's just a pregnancy. Her body is literally built for it. I could hear my youngest breath catch on the phone, her hope just shattering. The pain twisted into anger. Of course, she screamed at her. She was wounded. But my eldest, sitting there in her perfect house with her perfect family, couldn't see past her own selfishness. She was hoarding her good fortune, keeping it all for herself. So my youngest posted on Facebook. I know people will judge her for that, but they don't understand. It wasn't an attack. It was a cry for help. A desperate plea from a woman whose heart had just been broken by the one person in the world who could fix it. She wanted the family to see what was happening, to understand her pain. She felt alone and she reached out. And what did my perfect, strong eldest daughter do? She responded with her own post. But hers wasn't a cry of pain. It was a weapon. She laid out all these private medical details, twisting the story to make herself look like a fragile victim, and her sister like some kind of monster for even asking. She hid behind doctor's orders to justify her selfishness, and she did it in public. She invited strangers into our family's most private moments just so she could get a few hundred likes and have everyone tell her how right she was. It was cruel, and it was designed to humiliate her sister. I knew I had to step in. I called her and asked her to lunch. Just us. Mother and daughter. This needed to be handled inside the family, not on the internet. When we sat down, I tried to make her understand. I brought her into this world. Her body, her health, it's not just hers. It's part of the family I built. Her first duty is to that family, to her blood. She didn't get it. She started talking about the risks again, about how her kids could be left without a mother. It was such melodrama. I finally had to be blunt. They will live, I told her. Children are strong. They adapt. They would have their father, their aunt, their grandparents. But your sister, the pain of not having a child, is a hole that never ever gets filled. You are asking her to suffer for a lifetime so you can avoid a little risk and a few months of being uncomfortable. She just stared at me, her face pale. Then she stood up, threw her napkin on the table, and walked out without another word, like a teenager throwing a tantrum. I sat there alone in the restaurant, just shaking my head. She didn't understand her duty. She didn't understand love. That evening, the silence in our house was heavier than I'd ever known it to be. My husband, her father, came home late. I knew he'd spoken to her. I could see it on his face, that hard, disappointed look he gets when he thinks he's right about something. He didn't even ask about my day. He just stood in the living room doorway, arms crossed, and said, "You need to stop this." Just like that. Stop this. as if I were a child playing a game. As if the gaping wound in our family was something I had created instead of something I was desperately trying to heal. I was just trying to talk to her, I said, keeping my voice even. I was trying to make her see her sister's pain by telling her that her own children would be fine without her, he shot back. His voice was rising. What in God's name is wrong with you? Did you even hear what you just said? Of course I heard it. It was a hard truth, but it was the truth. Children are survivors. My eldest daughter's children have a father, a big house, money, everything they could ever need. They would be sad, of course, but they would be okay. My youngest daughter has a hole in her life that can never be filled. How could he not see the difference? You've never understood, I told him, and my own voice started to shake. You see everything in black and white. Right and wrong. You don't understand the bond between them, the connection a mother has. I am trying to keep this family whole. And all you can do is take her side. Her side, he laughed a bitter, ugly sound. She's not asking for a side. She's asking to be allowed to live her life. The doctors told her it was dangerous. This isn't a game. You are pushing her to risk her life because you've decided her sister deserves a baby more. He stepped closer, his face all tight with anger. You've always done this, coddled the youngest. She's your golden child, and you'll burn down everything around her just to make sure she's happy. Golden child. That's what he called my poor broken girl. The one who has struggled for everything while her sister sailed through life. It was so unfair, so cruel. I was not coddling our most wounded child. I was trying to save her. You're a monster, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. That word again. The word they were all probably using at my daughter's house. You're acting like a monster. That broke me. For 40 years, this man had been my partner. He'd seen me raise our girls, bandage their knees, sit through their school plays, hold them when their hearts were broken, and now he stood in our living room and called me a monster. All because I was trying to do what a mother does, fix things for her children. Get out, I whispered back. I didn't even know I was going to say it until it was out. He just stared at me for a long moment. He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, turned around, and went upstairs. I heard the closet door open. I heard a suitcase zip shut. He walked back down the stairs, bag in hand, and didn't even look at me as he went to the door. I'm going to my daughter's, he said, his hand on the knob. The one who needs her father right now. And then he was gone. He left our home, our marriage, to go comfort the daughter who already has everything, leaving me all alone to pick up the pieces with the daughter who has nothing. The days since then have been the longest of my life. The house is empty. My youngest calls me 12 times a day, crying. She feels so alone, so attacked. I'm the only one she has left. I try to be strong for her, to tell her that we'll get through this, but my own heart feels like it's been ripped out. My husband is still there. My eldest daughter posts pictures on Facebook. Pictures of him playing with his grandchildren. Pictures of them all having a family dinner, smiling. They look so happy, like a perfect little family that has cut out the sickness. They've made me the sickness. They're all huddled together in their fortress of righteousness, pointing their fingers at me. The manipulative mother. The monster. But they don't see what I see. I see one daughter blessed with so much she can't even see how rich she is, and another daughter starving for just a small piece of that happiness. I see a family with a cure for its own illness right inside of it, but one member is selfishly hoarding the medicine. They say I'm the one who divided this family, but I was the only one brave enough to try and make it whole. I was the only one who saw the imbalance and tried to fix it. They can call me a villain. They can post their happy pictures and pretend I don't exist. But a mother knows. A family is a body, and when one part is sick, the other parts have to help it heal. That's not monstrous. That's love. It's a fierce, painful, difficult love that people like my husband and my eldest daughter are too weak to understand. And I will stand by my youngest daughter, my baby, until the very end, because that is my duty. That is my love.
Story 11.
My husband would tell you this story different. In his version, I'm the villain. The ungrateful, cheating wife who threw away a perfect life. And maybe I am. But a story is never just one person's version of the truth. My life with him, especially near the end, had become a ghost story, and I was the ghost. When I met David, it was electric. I was a teacher, he was in his last year of law school, and we were a team. We talked for hours about our future. Asterisk. Our time's future. He was going to be a brilliant lawyer, and I was going to get my master's, then my doctorate. We were going to build something amazing together. He was funny, he was smart, and he saw me. He really saw me. Then he passed the bar. I was so proud of him I thought my heart would burst. We celebrated, we toasted to that future we'd planned. And then he started his job at the firm. The 6 zero-hour weeks he promised were just temporary. Just to pay off his massive student loans became 7 zero-hour weeks. Then they just became his life. Our team of 2 became a one-man show with a supporting character. Me, we'd agreed that I'd quit my teaching job. With his new salary, we could afford for me to go back to school full-time, just like we planned. It made sense on paper, but it meant my world shrank overnight. I went from having a career, colleagues, and my own paycheck to being at home alone studying in an apartment that was always silent. He called it providing. I called it disappearing. Our conversations became one-sided interviews. I'd try to tell him about a breakthrough I had in my research, or a funny story about a professor. He'd nod his thumb already, scrolling through emails on his phone. His mind was always somewhere else with a client who was in a real crisis, not with his wife who was just lonely. I started to feel like a line item in his budget. The strain of my tuition wasn't something he ever said out loud, but I felt it. I felt it in the way he'd sigh when a new bill came in, the way he'd talk about bonuses and billable hours, as if our whole life depended on them. I was just there. I kept the apartment clean, made sure he had food to eat when he finally stumbled home at 10 p.m., and I kept myself quiet so he could rest. I was a household appliance. a well-maintained piece of property. The loneliness was a physical weight. It sat on my chest and made it hard to breathe. I tried to talk to him about it a few times. He'd look at me completely confused. But you have everything he'd say. I'm working this hard for times us, asterisk. But he wasn't. He was working that hard for him. I wasn't a part of the equation anymore. I was the reason the equation was so difficult to solve. Then one day the silence was broken. I ran into Bob at a coffee shop near campus. Bob was my boyfriend in college, my first serious relationship. We hadn't seen each other in almost a decade. It was that simple. There was no plan, no malice. He just saw me in line and said my name. We sat and talked for maybe an hour. He asked me what I was doing, what I was studying. And when I told him, he asked follow-up questions. He didn't look at his phone once. He just listened. He laughed at my jokes. He saw me the person, not the lawyer's wife. It was like a drink of water after years in the desert. That one coffee turned into another. It was my secret. My one little thing that was just for me. David was always working weekends, needing peace and quiet to prepare for a big case. He was exiling me from his life, so I found somewhere else to go. I filled the emptiness with someone who actually wanted to be with me. It got physical. I'm not going to lie or make excuses for that part. It just happened. Being with Bob was easy. It was feeling desired. It was feeling like the main character in my own life for a few hours a week. In those moments, I wasn't thinking about my marriage or my husband at all. And I know how terrible that sounds, but it's the truth. My marriage already felt so empty that it was like I was single. I was just trying to escape the crushing loneliness of a life where I felt completely and utterly alone, even when my husband was sleeping right next to me. We took pictures. Stupid happy selfies on a day trip we took to the coast. We were just messing around. He had his arm around me, and in one of them we were kissing. I saved them to an old laptop hard drive. I had a place to keep things from that part of my life. I didn't know why exactly. Maybe I just needed proof that I existed, that someone had seen me. The necklace. That's the part that David will focus on. The part he used to convict me. In some of the photos, I'm wearing a simple silver necklace he gave me for our first anniversary. He points it out. It will sound like the ultimate betrayal. Like I was flaunting his love while I was in the arms of another man. But the truth is so much more pathetic. That necklace was a gift, yes, but it had become my times necklace. I never took it off. It was a part of me like a mole on my skin. I didn't put it on that day to spite him or to make a statement. I didn't think about it at all. I just forgot it was there. Because in those moments with Bob, I had forgotten about David too. That was the real tragedy. I ended it with Bob about a month ago. The guilt was starting to eat at me, and I knew what I was doing wasn't a solution. It was a temporary fix for a problem I needed to face. I was going to talk to David. I was going to demand we go to counseling, that we find that team we used to be. I was preparing my speech, gathering my courage. I came home yesterday afternoon from the library. David was supposed to be at the office until late, preparing for a big deposition. But his car was in the driveway. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I walked inside, and the apartment was dead silent. His briefcase was on the floor, his coat thrown over a chair. It was messy, which was unlike him. "David!" I called out. No answer. I walked toward our home office. The door was ajar. And then I saw it. In a box in the back of my closet, I keep old electronics and memories. Old phones, chargers, and that old laptop hard drive. It's been in that box for years. But the box was on the floor of the office open, and the hard drive wasn't inside. My eyes shot to his desk. I saw the small black rectangle and the blue glow of its indicator light. It was plugged into his PC. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic trapped bird. I took a slow step into the office, then another. The monitor glowed a cold clinical light in the dim room. On the screen was the photo. The one of me and Bob on the coast, the wind in my hair, a stupidly happy, carefree smile on my face. The one where he was leaning in to kiss my cheek. I felt sick. My whole body went cold, then hot. He'd seen it. He'd seen everything. My first thought wasn't shame, it was a desperate, panicked need to explain. To tell him about the loneliness, the silence, to make him understand the times why, asterisk. He had to let me explain. But David is a lawyer. He doesn't listen to explanations. He listens to evidence. And the evidence was right there. My eyes scanned the desk, looking for a note, a letter, anything. And then I saw it. It was so small, so petty, that it stole my breath. A little yellow sticky note stuck to the bottom of the monitor. On it was his precise, neat handwriting, the same he used for legal briefs. It was just an arrow drawn in black ink pointing up at the screen. Not at my face or Bob's. It pointed directly at the little silver necklace I was wearing in the photo. That's when I knew this wasn't about heartbreak. This wasn't the lashing out of a man in pain. This was the calculated cruelty of a prosecuting attorney delivering his closing argument. The arrow wasn't a cry of, "How could you?" It was a gotcha. He wasn't wounded. He was winning. He had found the one piece of evidence that made my crime not just an infidelity, but a personal targeted betrayal. He had twisted the knife with surgical precision. I stumbled back from the desk and pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a text. A frantic jumble of words. "David, please, we have to talk." "Please, let me explain." I hit send. A moment later, a notification popped up. Asterisk. Message blocking is active. Asterisk. He had already blocked my number. He hadn't even waited for me to get home. He found the photos, set his trap, and then cut off all communication before I even knew there was a war. Panic set in, real and suffocating. This wasn't a fight. You can't have a fight with someone who refuses to show up. I ran through the apartment. His closet was half empty. His dop kit was gone from the bathroom. He had packed a bag. He had planned this. My frantic calls weren't to beg for forgiveness, not yet. They were a desperate attempt to find the man I married inside the cold, analytical stranger he had become. I called his office the next morning, my voice cracking. The paralegal who had always been so friendly to me was suddenly ice. "Mr. Miller is in depositions all day and has instructed us he is not to be disturbed," she said in a monotone. "All future communication should go through his legal counsel." "His legal counsel? I'm his wife!" I screamed into the phone. "Not for long, I imagine," she said and hung up. I was losing my mind. The silence in the apartment was a living thing now, mocking me. I had to see him. I had to look him in the eye. I knew where he'd be. His brother Mark lived 20 minutes away. They were incredibly close. I got in my car and drove, rehearsing what I would say, my heart a lead weight in my chest. When I pulled up to Mark's house, I saw David's car in the driveway. A wave of relief washed over me. He was here. I could talk to him. I ran up to the door and rang the doorbell. I could hear dogs barking inside, deep, loud barks, Dobermans. Mark was obsessed with them. The door opened a crack. It was Mark, not David. He looked at me with pure disgust. "You need to leave Wendy," he said, his voice flat. "Mark, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I just need to talk to him. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "He doesn't want to talk to you," he said, starting to close the door. I put my hand on the door to stop him. "Please, just let me see him." His face hardened. "You're not listening. Get off my property, now." From behind him, one of the Dobermans growled a low rumbling sound that vibrated through the door. "I'm not kidding," Mark said, his eyes like chips of ice. "Take one more step and I'll let the dog say hello." I froze. He would do it. He would actually let his dogs on me. This was the family that had welcomed me in, that had called me a sister. Now they were pointing a weapon at me. David had done more than just leave. He had circled the wagons. He had turned his family and his law firm into a fortress, and I was the enemy at the gate. I walked back to my car, defeated, humiliated. That was the last time I tried to make direct contact. It's been 3 weeks. I received a letter from a lawyer I've never heard of. It informed me that David had filed for divorce and that I would be served papers shortly. It also stated that he had canceled all our joint credit cards and that a check for a provisional allowance was enclosed. My life had been reduced to a legal transaction. He told his brother he feels nothing for me anymore. Not anger, not sadness. Just nothing. And that's the part that breaks my heart into a million pieces. Because it proves what I feared all along, sitting alone in that silent apartment. I wasn't a partner he had lost. I wasn't a wife he was mourning. I was just a case. A messy, emotional file he'd reviewed, made a decision on, and closed. He'd moved on to the next one, and I was left in the evidence locker. My biggest mistake wasn't cheating on my husband. It was not realizing I'd been married to a ghost all along.
Story 12.
My husband thinks I don't see the way he looks at me anymore. He's wrong. I see everything. I see the way his eyes skim over me instead of settling. I see the quick, tight smile he gives me when I get dressed. A smile that says, "Good effort," instead of, "You're beautiful." Most of all, I see the way he looks at his sister and then back at me. It's in that split-second comparison that I feel myself disappear. We had our babies around the same time. Our beautiful, perfect daughter arrived in March, and his sister's little boy came in April. I'm 38. This was my miracle baby, the one I'd waited my whole life for. His sister is 21. For her it was an oops, but a happy one, of course, because her life is one long, happy accident. And that's where the problem started. She didn't just bounce back. It's like the baby was never there. A flat stomach, tiny waist, not a single stretch mark. She paraded around in a crop top at the family barbecue 6 weeks postpartum. 6 weeks. I was still wearing adult diapers and wincing every time I sat down. My husband Mark started getting obsessed. He'd scroll through her Instagram showing me pictures. "Look at Chloe, isn't she amazing?" he'd say. And it felt like a knife twisting. Amazing. Yes, she's amazing. It's also amazing what you can achieve when your parents pay for a full-time nanny, a personal chef who specializes in postpartum nutrition, and a trainer who comes to your house 3 times a week. I don't have any of that. I have a baby who won't sleep unless she's on my chest. A C-section scar that still aches and a hunger that feels like a black hole in my stomach from breastfeeding around the clock. The worst part is I gave him the ammunition he's using against me now. One night I broke down. I was exhausted hormonal, and I'd just spent 10 minutes trying to zip up a pair of my old jeans and failing. I was looking at a picture Chloe had posted, a selfie in a bikini, and the comments were all fire emojis and people saying, "I wish I looked like you." I was crying, and I whispered to Mark, "I'd do anything to look like her. I just want to feel like myself again." I wanted him to hold me. I wanted him to say, "You're beautiful, you just had a baby. Be kind to yourself." I wanted him to see times me, times his wife, the mother of his child who was hurting. Instead, his eyes lit up. He saw a problem to be solved. And apparently, I was the problem. He went into what I call his fix-it mode. The next day he called Chloe. I heard him on the phone taking notes. So no carbs at all, okay. And processed foods, got it. Lots of vegetables. He came into the living room looking like he'd discovered the cure for cancer. "I've got the plan," he announced proudly. "We're going to do this. I'm going to help you." His help was a new kind of hell. He started watching everything I ate. If I reached for a cracker, he'd say, "Is that on Chloe's plan?" He'd make these huge, disgusting vegetable smoothies for breakfast that I had to choke down. He threw out the granola bars I kept by the bed for middle-of-the-night feeding sessions because they had too much sugar. My own home started to feel like a fat camp run by a drill sergeant who used to love me. I tried to explain to him that I'm breastfeeding, that I'm hungry all the time. I need calories. I need energy. I can't live on steamed kale and grilled chicken. He just waved it off. Chloe's breastfeeding too, and she's not eating junk, he said. I wanted to scream that Chloe also gets 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep and has someone else cook her perfectly balanced, calorie-dense, and nutritious meals. I just get whatever I can grab with one hand while holding a screaming baby. Yesterday was the breaking point. He told me he'd take care of the groceries from now on to remove the temptation. I knew what that meant. Our fridge would become a green and beige prison of health foods I didn't have the time or energy to cook. So while he was at the gym, I took the baby and I went to the store myself. It felt like an act of rebellion. I bought the things that felt like home. A loaf of sourdough bread for toast in the morning, a box of pasta, and a jar of sauce for a 10-minute dinner. I even bought a bag of chocolate-covered pretzels, my one weakness. I wasn't planning on eating the whole bag. I just wanted to know it was there. I wanted one thing in my life that was just for me. One little piece of comfort that wasn't up for debate. I came home and hid the pretzels in the back of the pantry. I left the other groceries on the counter and went to put the baby down for her nap. She actually went down without a fight for once. It felt like a sign. A small victory. I walked back to the kitchen, my mouth already watering for a piece of toast, thick with butter. It was the only thing I'd been looking forward to all day. The first thing I noticed was the smell. A weird, savory, boiling vegetable smell. Mark was standing at the stove, stirring a big pot, his back to me. He was in his workout clothes, sweat still glistening on his neck. He turned around and gave me that bright problem solver smile. Hey, honey. Just making us a healthy soup for dinner? My eyes went to the counter where I'd left the grocery bag. It was gone. All of it. The bread, the pasta, the sauce. A cold dread started to creep up my spine. I walked over to the pantry and opened it. I pushed aside the quinoa and the cans of chickpeas. The back of the shelf was empty. My pretzels were gone too. I stood there for a moment, the pantry door open, just staring at the empty space where my little bit of happiness used to be. I took a slow breath and turned around to face him. He was still smiling, completely oblivious, like a hero waiting for his medal. I held out the spoon, offering her a taste of the soup. I'm helping you. This is what you wanted, remember? You said you'd do anything to be like Chloe. Her face, which had been pale with confusion, turned a deep, blotchy red. My food, Mark. Where is it? She said again, her voice low and tight like a wire about to snap. It's gone, I said, trying to keep my tone even and reasonable. I threw it out. We can't have that stuff in the house if we're serious about this. It's temptation. You were sabotaging yourself the minute I turned my back. That's when the screaming started. It was like a dam breaking. Not just yelling, but this raw, guttural sound that didn't even seem like it could come from her. I'm breastfeeding, she shrieked, her hands flying up to her head. I need to eat. I'm hungry all the time. That was my food. I put the spoon down, my frustration starting to boil over. Logic wasn't working. Chloe is breastfeeding too, and she's not eating bags of pretzels. It's an excuse. Chloe has a cook! She screamed back, tears now streaming down her face. Chloe has a trainer! Chloe has her parents paying for a nanny so she can sleep 8 hours a night. Don't you dare compare me to her. Of course, I was comparing them. How else do you measure success? You take a goal, you look at the person who achieved it, and you replicate the steps. It's simple. It's efficient. This isn't about her cook or her trainer, I said, raising my voice to be heard over her crying. This is about simple choices. It's about putting down the bread and picking up a vegetable. She just shook her head, sobbing. You don't get it. You haven't looked at me, not really, since our daughter was born. You look right through me. I'm just a project to you now. A problem you need to fix. She was twisting everything. This whole thing, this grand gesture of taking control and helping her, was my attempt to find her again. To bring back the woman who didn't sigh at her own reflection. To get back the connection she herself said she felt was fading. I was doing this times for us, asterisk. I threw up my hands in defeat. Fine. I try to help you with the one thing you told me was making you miserable, and I'm the bad guy. I get it. She didn't say another word. She just turned and walked out of the kitchen. A minute later, I heard our bedroom door slam shut. I was left alone in the kitchen. The healthy soup simmering on the stove. A perfect logical solution that nobody wanted. The whole house was silent, except for the gentle bubbling of the pot. The next few days were a special kind of hell. A cold war fought in whispers and averted gazes. The soup sat in the fridge untouched. I'd eat a bowl for lunch, telling myself it was delicious, that it was the taste of discipline. She ate things that were technically healthy, but with a kind of quiet fury. She'd stand at the counter and eat a plain salad with no dressing or a piece of dry chicken, her jaw tight. She wasn't doing it to be healthy. She was doing it to spite me. To show me how miserable my plan was making her. She stopped talking to me about anything other than the baby. Does she need a diaper change? Can you watch her while I shower? Every question was transactional. The warmth was gone. I'd come home from work and the air in our house would be thick and heavy with everything she wasn't saying. One evening, I found her in the nursery just holding our daughter and crying silently in the dark. I stood in the doorway wanting to go to her, to hold her, but I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry. I want you to be happy. Felt like the wrong move. I finally broke down and called my sister. I needed a sanity check. I don't get it, Chloe, I said, pacing in the backyard. I did exactly what you told me. I got rid of all the junk food I made healthy meals, and she's acting like I committed a crime. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mark! You threw her food away like in the trash. Yeah, she bought it right after I'd done the healthy shopping. It was a cry for help. I had to be the strong one. Oh, honey, no, Chloe sighed. And for a second I thought she was going to lecture me. But then she said, you can't just force it. It's a mindset. But you're right about the food. Getting all the processed carbs out of the house was the single most important step for me. It's just, you know how emotional she is. You have to be delicate, emotional. That was it. That was the word. I wasn't wrong in my plan, just in my delivery. I hadn't accounted for how emotional she would be. Chloe understood. I felt a wave of relief. My logic was sound. I just needed to be more delicate. That night, I tried again. I went into the bedroom where she was folding baby clothes on the bed, her back to me. "Hey," I said softly. "I've been thinking. I get that I was a little aggressive. I'm sorry about that. But my goal was a good one. I just want you to feel good again. I want us times to be good again." She didn't turn around. She just kept folding a tiny pink onesie with meticulous, angry precision. "Do you know what would make me feel good, Mark?" she said, her voice flat. "It would be for my husband to think I was beautiful even if I still have a belly. It would be for him to bring me a cookie when I'm up at 3 a.m. with the baby, not to throw my food in the garbage. It would be for him to hold me and tell me I'm a good mom, not hand me a diet plan based on his 1-year-old sister." She finally turned to look at me, and her eyes were empty. "You didn't do this for me. You did this for you. You don't like how I look, and you thought you could fix me." I opened my mouth to argue, to explain that he was wrong, that she had it all backwards. But no words came out. Because in that moment, she didn't look like my wife. She looked like a stranger. A sad, tired stranger who was convinced I was her enemy. And I had no idea how to solve that. I had the blueprint, the plan, the perfect solution. And she just refused to see it. What are you supposed to do when someone you love doesn't want to be fixed?